All right, Jastin. A through C.
Oh,
Oh. Oh my goodness. Wicked is now the number one ranked financially box office wise musical all time.
That was fast,
yeah.
but that's cool.
All time? Wow.
For movie musicals, yes. For like, I'm sorry, not movie, like live action, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a little
Still,
more sense.
though, it's
But still, yeah.
Wow.
It's still cool.
Yeah, it hasn't beaten like the likes of Beauty and the Beast and Lion King, the animated versions, but yes. And technically, I don't think they count the quote unquote live action Lion King as a live action movie. Because it's not. It's a CGI movie, so it's animated, but we've always called it that as a society. So, but yeah, Wicked is number one. And most of it's here. I'll say that too. Most of it is in America. Also, in weird news, Arnie Hammer is back in the news because he's like, yeah, Hollywood's become really sympathetic to my cannibalism controversy. And I'm just having to turn down roles left and right.
Is that true, or is he just saying it because he's playing a
Who
game?
knows?
Okay.
I mean, the thing
weird.
is regardless of anything, he has all the money in the world. His family is beyond super rich. Like, he's not completely destitute or anything like that. His family is rich. His last name Hammer. Yeah, that is the Hammer essentially associated with Arm & Hammer. So, yeah, boy's got money.
That's why his name is so close to Arm & Hammer.
Probably. That rich people do weird shit like that.
It is very close. Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. I mean, I know he had done an interview on Bill Maher's podcast a couple of months ago or whatever. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, and the thing is you know what? It also could be partially true just for the sheer fact that, like, Kevin Spacey's in movies still. They're not movies anybody's watching or getting released or anything like that. He could be, they could be offering him the lead role of Revenge of the Dust Mites 9. Who knows? Like, so that's not, I doubt anybody's like going, oh man, he was offered, Doctor Doom or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like that either way. It's too toxic of a name. I think even still, it's too people. It's even if there wasn't also the sexual predator allegations upon it too, it's just weird. You know what I mean? Let's just like what it is when he's like, yeah, I want to eat you. That's just weird. Nobody really just wants to look up on screen and look at somebody and go, that man wants to eat people. It's weird. And it's just not the type of press you want. Like, I mean, because let's just say it was just that. And like I said, none of this other allegations, just the cannibalism thing. Every press interview he does, somebody's going to be like, what kind of hot sauce do you like on your people? You know what I mean? Like, how long do you cook your human for? That's what people are going to be asking him constantly. Do you really want that on any of your press tour stuff?
Mm-mm.
Although, what's his name? That guy, Sean, whatever, from Hot Ones? That would be funny if he was just like, what do you prefer, human fingers or chicken wings? Like after he takes like the last dab or something. You know what I mean? Like that would be kind of funny.
That's the show that, I would accept it from.
Like, yeah, do you really want that one guy from like, I'm from moviebuzz.com. What are your top 10 favorite types of people to eat? Like, that's all it's going to be. So, who knows? We'll see. We'll see. Because if you're having to turn down roles, are you doing any? Like, and that's what we'll see. We'll see if he's in any movies. Outside of that, one of the last things, a slight little Diddy update. It's just a fun quote. Is one of Diddy's bodyguards and producers came out and was like, I didn't want to be around him unless there was a camera. Because like he just knew that like if there were other people, like other cameras, not like the hidden cameras he was using to blackmail people. I'm just saying like cameras were out. He didn't want to be around Diddy because it was just sketch.
Sounds about right.
Oh, man.
Yep. Smart man.
Anyway, wow, we went from like doing so much news the last few episodes. I think I'm tapped. I don't know if I have any other news. I think one of the Osmond siblings died, or one of the family. It's Wayne Osmond. I don't know who that is. But he is one of the Osmonds. It's all founding member of the Osmonds. I just thought that was Donnie and Murray.
Yeah, so did I.
But apparently there was someone else named Wayne Osmond. And I'm just looking at the guy and I'm like, he has to be their dad, right? I guess I could click the link. But, oh, he was one of the brothers. I guess he's their older brother. But yes, Wayne Osmond. And it says he was known for his strong baritone voice.
I feel bad that I didn't know he was a musician or part of that at all. So that's sad.
I mean, to be fair, let's be slightly real. Donnie takes up all the air in the room.
That's true.
Have you seen that man do a live performance of songs from Mulan?
Yeah, he would do every role himself.
It's both impressive because he does have a good voice, but also the cringiest shit ever. He's fucking Donnie Osmond, the most white bread motherfucker that's ever white breaded. He is white bread covered in mayonnaise. And he's like sitting there in like Mulan costumes, like doing shit. Like, I'll make a man, and like doing like fucking stick moves and shit. It's so weird. Like, you want to call it cultural appropriation, but he is so white, I don't think it's close enough to doing anything to anybody.
Yeah, which wasn't he the singing voice in the movie?
Yes,
yeah.
That's
so
why
maybe
he does it.
Makes it a little better, I guess. But yeah.
Yes, he is the singing voice of that. I have to look it up because it's going to drive me nuts because the regular voice of him, it's BD Wong. They had BD fucking Wong as him. And they had Donnie fucking Osmond sing for him.
And I could be wrong, but I thought BD Wong did some Broadway at one point.
I don't even know if BD Wong can sing. I just feel like he can.
Yeah, maybe that's why I feel like surely he could have used his own voice.
I just
But maybe
look at
not.
him and I go, you're really talented. I'm sure you can sing. He's just so talented.
This is true. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe they just cast the voice singers before the speaking people or something.
Let's quit trying to give Disney an out. They were just doing racist
You're
shit.
right. You're right. Never mind.
Let's be real. They were doing corporate Disney racist shit. Like, come on.
That's true. Disregard.
It's kind of why, like, you know, why you had Jonathan Taylor Thomas as the voice of Simba, but not the singing voice. You know, things like that. But apparently, I will say this. The person that does the singing voice, it's going to drive me nuts. I don't remember this guy's name. He was the older brother in Smart Kid, or a Smart Guy, but the little fucking that movie. But he, like, his mom was like his agent, and she set him up for life. Jason Weaver is the singing voice on that. He was also in the movie Drumline, one of Jastin's favorites. Jastin, why'd you make that face? I know for a fact you loved Drumline. Jastin, we had so many talks about that movie. And you were like, yeah, of course. Somebody that can't read music can get a music scholarship. That's a real thing. I remember you defending it so adamantly, Jastin.
Mr. Nick Cannon.
But yes, Jason Weaver. I just remember hearing the story, though, like his mom, more or less, they were like, hey, we'll give you like 50,000 or something like that just to be the singing voice of Simba. And instead, she turned it and she was like, make it like 12 or whatever, but we get like a percentage of the royalties from the song, from all the songs of young Simba. Oh, they've made a stupid amount of money off doing it that way. Like, and Disney paid so little up front, I think that they thought, like, surely we're going to win this. No. All like, I just can't wait to be king. All of those like songs, you know what I mean? Like, just wrecking havoc. I'm like, kudos for him and his mom.
Yep, smart move.
And it's because they had, like, his mom was like a former musician. Like, they had family in the industry and they were like, royalties is where you make your money. How about that? So, fantastic. All right. I'm talking about the singing voice of Lion King at this point. I think it's safe to say maybe I'm running out of shit for the news. So, I don't know. I guess let's give our bodies to the night.
Somebody will listen to me.
Nobody knows anything but you.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
Come on.
Cinema Slayers.
Hey, Cinefans, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Slayers podcast. I'm Sterling, and as always, I'm joined by Heather and Jastin. And tonight, we're going to talk about what we liked, didn't like, and everything in between with the newest of new Nosferatus. We will go spoiler-free recommendations and scores, and then into a more spoiler-centric section with time codes in the description to allow you to jump around if you so require in both audio and video formats. And with all that, who goes first really depends on this question. Jastin, was this an ugly enough vampire for you?
Yes.
All right, Jastin, you're a Nosferatu expert then. I know distinctly the last time we did a vampire movie, you were talking about how you like ugly vampires over sexy vampires. And you even mentioned Nosferatu.
I don't remember that being how the conversation went. I don't think it was so much a ugly versus pretty or
You
sexy or anything.
You
I don't
said
think
you
that's
liked
what I said.
You said you liked your monstrous vampires over the sexy ones. I want to say this was Renfield, and I'm pretty sure that's why you don't remember this. Is because you have admittedly forgot you watched Renfield.
That is true. But I remember us but even if we had that conversation there, we revisited it during Voyage of the Demeter.
Oh, we did.
I do remember saying during that, it's funny how your Sterling brain processes things people say, but to understand it. But I do remember saying I hated the depiction of Dracula in that because he was too monster-like. Like, I remember saying, I like a little balance of both. Yes, he can be monstery in some ways, but I like him talking. I like him manipulating. I like him doing things of that nature.
You like him being at least slightly human, because he was just basically a bad person in that.
Yeah.
He was practically just
basically.
Man-Bat from fucking Batman.
Yeah. He was just kind of like just a straight up monster.
Do you remember how dumb he looked at the end of that movie? When he's all at the tavern, he's like, Mr. Silverstein or whatever the fuck that guy's name was. And he's like, I'm in the shadows. Looking like an idiot.
Yeah, it was dumb. And then how he wasted all that time when he just could have killed people at the end.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, that movie was dumb. But anyway, not to revisit that too much. The only point I was making was I prefer that Dracula a little more. And I think we even brought up Bram Stoker's Dracula and you were like, so you prefer something more like a sexy Gary Oldman or something like that. And I was like, well, that's better. But I mean, I didn't hate the Gary Oldman performance. I don't know. I go back and forth with Bram Stoker's because there are things I really liked about it. It's probably one of the more accurate depictions of the book, Dracula. You know what I mean? So it's got a lot of characters, a lot of parts from the book, though he took a lot of liberties with the story from what I understand.
Yeah,
he made
all the Vlad the Impaler references.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the historical mythos. It is, but it's not like all of that was added for the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And he made Dracula more of a sympathetic figure. The woman kind of does fall in love with him a little bit, you know, though it's through manipulation. She kind of does have feelings for him. I don't know. That movie, I go back and forth with it. And as much as I love Keanu Reeves, that he's like that performance, his performance in that movie is kind of widely considered just one of the historically bad performances in what is otherwise a good movie. Like, it's laughably bad.
It's real funny because I'm just fine with it because I just don't take that movie seriously. So I'm just like, it's fine. Who cares? Like,
yeah.
But like, you know what's really funny? That like you called me out and you're like the Sterling brain way of doing things. I called you out for not remembering Renfield. You accidentally and unknowingly called me out for forgetting about the Voyage of the Dawn, whatever the fuck that movie was. The Demeter. I was thinking of the Dawn Treader, which is the Narnia one. But the Demeter, yes, I completely forgot about that. And so you accidentally called me out for that. Because I'm like, you said that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we did that. I forgot about that completely.
But it's a good carryover to this because those are two like just hella forgettable vampire movies or movies about vampires in general. And then we get to this one.
Before you start, I just want to make one comment. And I know this is like a whatever, but like, isn't it crazy that this movie has a more memorable Demeter than the entirety of the last Voyage of the Demeter that I completely forgot was a fucking movie till 5 minutes ago?
Yes,
That's
and it's like what,
crazy.
maybe 3 minutes in here.
Yeah.
It might be 3 or 4 minutes. It's better than that old movie.
It's a montage scene. They just montage their way through the whole Demeter.
Yep.
I completely fucking forgot about that movie. Like Demeter scene in this.
Yep.
Oh man, what a sorry.
Yeah, that 2-minute montage is better than that entire movie. But it's a good kind of segue into this because, like, I've never seen the 1922 silent film Nosferatu in its entirety. Mostly what I saw before was just little clips, and every now and then you see little clips. And when they talk about like old ass, like influential horror movies or movies that kind of introduced film ideas of horror and stuff like that, sometimes you'll see clips of Nosferatu and stuff like that. So I did a little bit of digging and I found the 1922 film. You can actually watch it on YouTube. And I'm not going to speak about it too long, but what I will say is that I definitely understand historically the significance of it. But boy, there's a lot in that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think there are scenes like, and some of it is a lack of technology, just a lack of ability, things like that. But like, there are scenes where like, I think it's supposed to take place at night, but it's clearly not night. And like,
there's so much. I'm gonna get into that later because there is a wild and crazy history as to what Nosferatu is. I mean, if you want, when you're done, I can actually go into it real quick before you, Heather.
Okay.
To just kind of go over the history of the Nosferatu film.
Okay, that might make sense since we're on it, but like just to give some thoughts on it, like, yeah, like there are scenes where I think it's supposed to be nighttime, but it's daytime. And I mean,
they didn't have no night vision, Jastin.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, I guess there was just no way to really like film at night. So you're just supposed to, I guess, imagine that it is night. But there are just some scenes where it's like he's doing weird things, that would just kind of be considered stupid now. There's a scene where he's walking around with his casket looking for a place to put it and shit like that. Like it's some of it is, looking at it through today's lens is really comical and stuff. But there is some of it where you're like, okay, but I see where they were going with this general idea of him being like this plague and like this shadow that looms over the place and is trying to get to this woman. And there are even some cool scenes where like they use shadow and stuff like that. It's very, very, very primitive, very like early techniques, but there were still some like effective things they did with him. And just what the makeup and the Nosferatu person, and I don't know how much of he actually looked like this, or if that was makeup, or if it was a combination of both, or what, however they made him look like that. He does look really ugly and kind of hideous. And there are some scenes where a scene I remember in particular was where our woman that's being stalked looks out the window and he's in the building, and it seems like he's in the building across from her and he's looking at her. And I remember going, okay, that's some creepy shit. For 1922, they were nailing some of the creepy factor. So I guess in the end, I understood what the idea was. It wasn't, of course, executed well just due to limited means, but it made me kind of excited to see this because I know that because Robert Eggers is a very good vision, especially when it comes to like optics and the look of things and the atmosphere of things. He's a very good director. And after seeing the previews of it, I was like, okay, I'm excited to kind of see what he does to this because he definitely has the ability will have the ability to make a much more superior version to this than this. So while that 1922 at times wasn't an easy watch, it did build my excitement and anticipation for this. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. So you can talk a little bit, Sterling.
For one, I did send you guys a picture of the guy that played Nosferatu in the original one. His name was Max Schreck. I did send you a picture of him, just so you have reference for your own self. But yeah, so the history of Nosferatu is essentially they were like, hey, we're going to make a movie. We're going to make Dracula. We're going to make the book Dracula into a movie. But then they never got the rights for it. And they went, oh, okay, well, we'll just change some stuff. We'll change it to Nosferatu, which is a weird misnomer because Bram Stoker mentions Nosferatu. I want to say it's like 27 times in his book. Because he thought that that was the Romani word for a vampire. It wasn't. So Nosferatu is just not a thing. But yes, so they were like, okay, well, they'll change it to Nosferatu. They'll take it from England and put it in Germany. They'll do things like that, and then they'll have him die by sunlight. Because if my memory serves me, I think Dracula dies from getting his head cut off in the original book. It's either he's decapitated or just stabbed through the neck with something, but it's not.
I think it's actually both.
Yeah.
He's stabbed in the neck and then.
Yeah.
But
and they did the whole daylight thing. So weirdly enough, Nosferatu is the reason why vampires die from sunlight. Is just because of the movie. Because they needed a cinematic way to show him die. Because, you know, it's not the 1920s. You can't go around decapitating people in your picture shows. You know? So they did all these changes and they're like, see, but it's not the same. And then a German court was like, guys, it's the same. Like, you have to destroy all these. And so weirdly enough, they were destroying prints because this is also back in the day when everything was a print of film. Weirdly enough, some bootleg copies of the film Nosferatu ended up in America. And it more or less debuted, I want to say in like 1929 here, 27 or 29, something like that, as a movie. And the thing is like, there's not really any prints of it anymore. And all of these things, it's a weird thing that just somehow they were able to cobble this fucking thing back together. And that's why you're able to watch it on shit like fucking YouTube. Plus, it's in the public domain at this point. They can't do a damn thing about it anyway. That's one of the reasons now anybody can do a Dracula. Anybody can do a Nosferatu. Anybody can do whatever they want with those properties because they're both public domain at this point. Because I want to say Dracula was written in like 1880 or 1890, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. So like these properties are so old at this point. Yeah. They're like, you can do whatever. But like, that's one of the weird things about like Nosferatu is the fact that like, it's weirdly the little movie that could. Because like I said, they were actively destroying prints of it for violating copyright law. And just somehow bootleg copies ended up here. And so back in the day, while they couldn't do like the voices, they used to have music with the movie. There's no copy of this movie with the original score. Like with the original music with it. Does not exist. So anything you've watched with this with music, it's not the original shit. Because they do not have a print with the music on it.
That's an interesting history of a movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, like I said, it's just one of those things that as much as it was this movie that was never really meant to be watched and was supposed to be destroyed and all these things, it's weirdly been like, as far as movies go, the blueprint for all vampires is this movie. You know, that's why, because I know some people were confused by Gary Oldman walking around in the sunlight in Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's because they could.
Yep.
It's not a real thing with vampires.
It just weakened him, but it didn't
Yeah.
And then I think it was even like at certain times or depending on when he fed or when he didn't, there were all these little things, but basically he's weaker in the sunlight, but really it doesn't,
And I don't even know if it's necessarily
him
that
or
he's
anything.
weaker. It's just he's not full powered. You know what I mean? He can't just do full Dracula. He can't like turn into a wolf or turn into bats and do all that other shit. He can't do that during the day. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's like he's just a regular supernatural being during the daylight. Like it's those weird things like that. But yeah, it's just one of those crazy things that people just don't really understand about vampire like lore when it comes to things, and how much of it weirdly goes to this movie that we have by accident and by ill-gotten means.
And really quick on the, I was looking up like the original word of Nosferatu. It says the word's exact etymology is unclear, but one suggested origin is the Romanian word Nosferatu, which means the offensive one or the insufferable one.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like I said, though, Bram Stoker legitimately just thought it was the word for vampire.
Right.
Like, that's the thing with it. It's like, it was that, but yeah, it's one of those crazy, crazy things where like,
and ironically now it kind of is like, isn't that crazy?
And that's the thing is it is the word for vampire now.
Yeah.
Like it's
what do you think of? I mean, if you see somebody says Nosferatu, how do you not think of
that's just a vampire.
Vampire, yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things, that weird things with like when it comes to like the history of words and stuff like that. Like it's one of the things that it's one of the only amazing things about the English language. When it comes to language rules and all this other stuff, English is garbage. It is one of the stupidest languages with rules and all this other stuff. But where English has almost a weird superpower compared to most languages is anything can become a word in English. And a legitimate word. Everybody can make fun of it and all this other stuff. But like, when you look at like modern language and stuff like that, everybody's like, oh, well, like, is sexting really a word? It is. Like, there's a clear definition and literary and linguistical meaning behind the word sexting or Nosferatu, or even small things like YOLO. It's a dumb, like, it's whatever you want to look at as dumb and this and that. It's still in English a real thing. It's a real
When you
word.
were growing up and people would say ain't, did your teachers and people ever go, ain't isn't a word? Don't say ain't isn't a word?
And yes, and one of the most fantastic things about the word ain't is ain't actually used to be proper English. As in, the rich used it.
Really?
But then poor people started using it. And then it was no longer proper to use that word. And that's kind of the weird history of why it became ain't a word. Because the proper, the high, high society wanted to stop it from being used again. Because poor people started using it.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's one of those weird, crazy things, like I said, about the English language that is weirdly magnificent about it. We can make a word out of anything. And a lot of other languages are somewhat hindered by that. Because sometimes they do have to put conjugation and all these other things with it. They have more steps to make words. We can just make anything a word. You can take any noun and make it a verb. You can also make any noun an adjective. You know what I mean? I mean, man, look at him Jastining over there.
Yep.
You can do that with anything in English.
And we always know what it means.
Yeah. Like the show Community, one of the main characters, Britta. They make Britta a fucking verb for most of that fucking show. They're like, oh man, look at you just Britted it. And it works. because of the way we structure our language. And that's what's so amazing about Nosferatu is, while Bram Stoker was an idiot and was wrong about it, he kind of was right. Just because it is now, it might not be the Romani word for vampire, but it's a fucking word for a vampire. That's for damn sure.
Yep.
Like, nobody's really walking into Nosferatu going, holy shit, it's a vampire movie. Oh, who would have thought? No, you know. All by accident. It's all, and also all by people trying to skirt the law and go, no, we're not ripping off this book. It's in German and it's a Nosferatu, not a vampire. Oh yeah, and changing his name. I forgot that too. Changing his name to like Olag or whatever the fuck it is instead of Dracula. Yeah, that was the other big change where they're like, see, it's not the same. Names are different. Yeah, that's the weird cinema history of Nosferatu.
Wow. So that was interesting. Like, because I knew a little bit about the court case and that all the copies had to go away and everything. And I when I first heard that story, I was like, well, then how is it around? How do people still have clips of it and stuff? But just hearing all of that and just how it survived, and it's almost a miracle it survived. But then it's also one of those like influential movies. So influential. It's one of the most influential movies as far as what we know of Dracula and vampires and everything like that. So what an incredible story. Which leads to this and what Robert Eggers was able to do with it, with his vision. And for all of these forgettable vampires that I've seen on screen, to me, this was a welcome version of Dracula, Nosferatu, everything like that. And I understand that Nosferatu is a real departure from the book and that source material, so I can't talk in that way. But as somebody who saw the entire 1922 film and then saw this film, I appreciated a lot what Robert Eggers did with this. This definitely won't be a version of a vampire that I'm going to forget for quite some time. I mean, and the thing about it is that most of and I haven't seen every version of Dracula, and there's been so many iterations and everything like that, but it feels like with most people, with these directors and these people who like depict him, it seems like most of them lean into, especially like when he has a human form or goes back and forth between two forms. But normally when he's a human, it seems like people try to lean more into that human part. You know, oh, he sucks blood and he's bad, but he also loves him. He's got some charm about him and he's got some affection. Or, yeah, he's Dracula, but he's also funny and ha, look at him, laugh at him and look at his blood puns and references. Or it's, you know, it seems like most people, when they try to depict him, they're like, well, yes, there are bad things about him. And yes, he wants to feed on people and he is the villain in this, but we want you to like some things about him too. We want you to find this part of him appealing in some way. But I like that this movie was just like, nah, man, we're just going to make him just the worst motherfucker. Like, we're just going to make him the worst, how can we make him the darkest, most intimidating, most like, how can we make him have a presence that feels like he is death itself? Like the things that sometimes they talk about in some of these books and stuff like that. And so I really like this version, just kind of going, we're just going to go full throttle into that. We aren't going to try to make him likable. He's not going to be popping jokes. There's not going to be some aspect of him that you like, nah, we want you to be afraid of this motherfucker. And I really like that. I like the leaning, picking, I like the picking of that lane and then letting your movie be about that. Now going into this, you know, I've seen a lot of clips online, and then, you know, some commercials, there are reviews, and there's people going like, oh, it's terrifying, and oh, it's the scariest movie of the year and everything like that. And I think sometimes when they put stuff like that out, obviously they want to get whoever they can to get in and watch the movie. So they don't care about what some of those things will seem like to some people. And I think a lot of that stuff people will go in misinterpreting what this is. This is not a slasher movie. This is not trying to be a scary movie like Freddy Krueger is a scary movie, or it's not trying to be like a scary movie like Scream or anything like that. It's not trying to jump scare you and all of that kind of shit like any of that stuff. Though there might be a scene or two where maybe the point or maybe an aim was to jump scare, but this is not scary in those ways. I didn't find it scary in that way. One description I heard, though, was that it is a dark, gothic nightmare fantasy. And I like that description of it. I think that was apt. I think that that's what it is. It's when they say dark, everything about it, it is definitely a beautiful, dark kind of fantasy movie. And Robert Eggers with the visuals, that might be the strongest thing about this, is just how it looks. It looks absolutely incredible. And I think it was shot, is this shot with 35 millimeter? Is that what this was?
I believe so. I don't think this was digital.
Yeah, I think that's how it was shot, because it's got it's got that kind of grainy effectiveness to it. And maybe that was also an homage to this being such an old story and such an old film. But all of that and what he was doing with the light and the shadows, and you know me, I'm a shadow person. You know, I just get giggly inside when I see good use of shadows and lighting and everything. And this movie definitely has that. So definitely one of the strongest movies I've probably seen this year, as far as like the execution of a tone, of a presence, and an atmosphere. I think this is one of the stronger movies for that. It always had a dark tone, atmosphere, and everything like that. It also has what I think are some excellent performances. And just to quickly get into some of those without spoiling too much, but Bill Skarsgård, I think he's unrecognizable as this Count Orlok Dracula Nosferatu character. He's almost unrecognizable, man. Like they really transformed him as far as how he looked and how he was speaking and how he was acting. I really thought that he did a great job as Count Orlok. And Lily Rose Depp, Johnny Depp's daughter, right?
Yeah.
I think that she does like a great job too. Of the iterations of these women that Dracula stalks and preys on, this probably might be one of my favorite performances of that character. She's the apple of the vampire's eye in this movie or whatever. And I think that the way that this is played and the way that they have this character be, I liked this version of it. You know, this person haunted by these dreams and marred by this whole thing, and this constant dread that this thing is coming towards you. I really like how it was played here. And sometimes in these other versions and other versions I've seen, every now and then the character seems to forget about it, or in some of these other versions, it's like, well, I don't want him, but I want him type shit. I really like how it was played here. I really like how this version of it was played. I think it was a good, like, line between dread and fearful, but also not understanding her feelings and trying to process them and trying to understand what is happening to her. I think that she was great. And she's asked to display a lot of different emotions in this. Sometimes it's kind of hitting her in a more like sensual way. Other times she seems batshit. Other times she's convulsing and foaming at the mouth. Other times she's asked to be fearful and have a sense of dread. She is asked to do quite a bit with her emotions. And I think for this movie, it was a really tough task. And I think that she shows up to work. Nicholas Hoult was also good. Willem Dafoe is good in this too. Like everybody, I don't want to like talk too long on everybody, but everybody does their job as far as characters are concerned. There are some parts that I think are just excellent and great. And then there are some parts that I think are not so great, or at least not as effective as the scenes that followed them or other scenes where we have the same characters. There are scenes where I don't think they are as effective as other scenes. And I think that if you were going into this thinking, oh, this is going to be like some scary movie, like what some of the critical response has been, or what they're kind of putting on advertisements and everything, I think there will be some people disappointed because it's not scary in the way that people, I think that most common people just interpret scary. But I think if you go in and you're just looking at it as a movie and you're just going in and you absorb the atmosphere and what the movie is trying to say, and you really just kind of watch this figure or this version of Dracula as it is, I really do think it's a pretty fun, dark, gothic, good time for the most part. You know, for the most part, I did enjoy what I was seeing, and just some incredible imagery that I don't think I'll soon forget. So it's not perfect, but overall, I think I really did enjoy this. This was the Dracula on screen that I wanted.
One thing I do have to dispute you on, though, is the best quote-unquote Mina character, because that's what it is.
Yeah, basically.
It's the Mina. That's Amy Yazbek from Dracula Dead and Loving It. She is the best.
You think so?
Yes, because she's also Marion and Robin Hood Men in Tights. She was on Wings. She was Flo in Problem Child. She's the best. I also had a huge crush on her as a child. So
okay,
but yes, she's the best. I'm just saying.
Got it.
Heather, what about you?
I think you make a good point, Jastin, that this for me is like not a version of Dracula that I will soon forget. I think it is very memorable in that way. Kind of what you said along the lines with the acting. Lily Rose Depp surprised me with her performance, and it's probably because I really haven't seen her in much else. I was pleasantly surprised with this, you know, like I didn't know that she was seasoned enough to really do this as well as she did. And I think she did a really good job. And I think also Nicholas Hoult obviously does a good job. I think he's just a really good actor in pretty much everything that I've seen him in. He's in your other favorite vampire movie, Jastin.
I was going to ask, are you really saying that about him in Renfield?
You know what, though? I think I remember being like, there was something about his character that I was like, he just did a good job, even if the movie wasn't good. I just thought his character was good for some reason. But he does like the endearing thing well as the types of characters he is. And I think that's why he does a good job in his performances. But I mean, yeah, I mean, like and the main person.
We do get to see him go fully bad as Lex Luthor.
Yeah,
And I'm
I'm
excited
excited
for
for it.
his Lex because he's got some acting chops, man. He can act. Like, there's no doubt he can.
Lightly
So,
offended though, because I have been perfecting this bald look for 19 years now. No, God, I'm at 22 years now. 22 years I've been trying to perfect the bald look. This motherfucker shaves his head once and he's just like pulling it off. Like, you motherfucker.
A grudge.
Anyway, sorry about that, Heather. He's bald. Nicholas Hoult, Lex Luthor, just had to bring it up.
No, I get it. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him in that role. But yeah, I mean, I think the main person to talk about in this is obviously Bill Skarsgård, because like what you said, Jastin, if I didn't know that it was him, I would not know that it was him. Like, definitely didn't look a single thing like baby Skarsgård to me. He just really, everything he did, like every note that he had to take for like, how do I make this character what it is? He just did it the best.
Now,
like, he's so good.
Now, quick question. Are you deducting any points at all for the fact that he was also the Crow this year? Have you ever seen one person in two different movies in 1 year and they are that far apart in acting performances?
I know, like,
it's crazy. Yeah.
It's you would almost don't even believe it. Like, that's just crazy.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I was thinking about it because to me, I think Bill Skarsgård is one of the better actors of like more recent years. And then because I was sitting thinking about all the things I've seen him in, and then I was like, oh, I forgot he was in The Crow. Granted, he's not the worst thing about The Crow, but he also, it's The Crow.
Is. Because you can't be the main character in a movie that bad and not take some of the blame. I mean, it's like when you're the quarterback of a bad team, it doesn't matter if you're putting up all-time stats. You got to take that responsibility.
That's fair. But I mean, and I don't know, like any villain he plays, like the John Wick villain, obviously Pennywise, like he's great with villains. Like he's a fantastic villain in any form that he does villain. But I mean, I've seen him in other things where he's not the villain, and he's good in that too. And also, to be fair, he was actually probably the best part of Barbarian for me. I mean, him and the other actress that he was with for the first 30 minutes of that movie was the best part. So, you know, I really just think there's something about like the way he approaches acting that he's just really good. And like the choices he makes as, you know, Count Orlok, I think he just really did everything to just make this character memorable. And so, I mean, this movie, in my opinion, is not as good as it is without him being Count Orlok. Like he is the reason this movie has, like, he's definitely the best thing about this movie, in my opinion. But yeah, I think like visually speaking, I would also agree. I think that is the best part of this movie. It's just visually beautiful. It is a stunning movie. And like, it gives you that dark, gloomy, dreadful vibe from the beginning, and it just carries it throughout. And they also, like you were saying, like the shadow and light thing that they do a lot in this film is really well done. And I also think they do some interesting transition shots. Like they're not the things I would think you would want to do transitions with, like just the back of someone's head going into like, oh, here's the next scene into the hallway or whatever it was. But it works. Like whatever it is they did just kind of worked. Interesting choices that actually paid off. So yeah, I thought that was done really well. Just the way they made this movie, I think was well done.
To speak to that and the transitions and these kind of, is that just an Eggers thing? Because remember in The Northman how he would just do that interrupt tree? The Norse tree would just pop up at certain times. And it's like, oh shit, what is this? Oh, okay.
Or just the entirety of the movie, The Lighthouse.
Yeah, the light. I was about to say the lighthouse. He just likes to like kind of shake it up a bit. I guess
Yeah,
he
does
just
it
likes to
different.
do it different. He don't. I guess he just doesn't really believe in the normal transition all the time. He wants to like mix it up on you. You know what I'm saying? Go left instead of right. Like he's just trying to juke you a little bit.
The
like,
entire movie of The Lighthouse is probably to me one of the most jarring movies ever. Because I feel like he took almost every movie making convention and just went, but what if I did the opposite? And he lucked out into it working, because we've talked about it before. Sometimes rules are rules for a fucking reason.
Mm-hmm.
And he just ended up this weird, perfect mixture of just the weirdest and unsettling movie ever, because the way it transitions makes you feel weird. At least it did for me. I felt weird watching it. And I feel like I've seen almost every kind of movie like known to man, at least at this point. I'm not saying I've seen every movie, but every kind of movie out there. I've seen that avant-garde bullshit where they say like 5 words the whole fucking movie and it's just them sitting in a field for 2 hours. Weird shit like that, but then I've seen, the most of blockbusters, all that stuff and everything in between. And The Lighthouse is just a movie onto its own. Like, it's one of those movies I don't know if I like it or not. I know I don't not like it, but I don't know if I like it. But I'll also tell anybody, you should watch The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
But I can't say I like it, because
it's that Eggers effect. Yeah.
I feel so weird watching that movie. And I think it is because he transitions in ways that no one else does, but he does it in every scene of the movie. Like this, it's just every once in a while, but The Lighthouse is like every single time, like Jastin said, instead of turning right, he goes left. And then it's like, oh, he's going to turn left here, turns right. And then you're like, oh, but he's going to turn left here. And he goes, nope. He does a U-turn and goes right back the other way. And I'm just like, what is he doing? Where is he going?
And even in The Witch, which we all love, you know,
that's still my favorite movie of his. I fucking love that movie.
No, it's great. It's now I kind of have it on the list as one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite horror movies now. But like even in that, he does some things with transitions in that. Like you said, Sterling, unsettling is a great way to describe him. He might be the king of just creating an unsettling atmosphere.
I was literally about to say that,
unsettling movement in a movie, because he does it in this one too. He's the king at that. Just one of the more unique filmmakers. Like, he's just one of those people where if I find out he's making a movie, at the very least, I'm going to be intrigued by it. Like, it's not even like it's going to be great because it's him. I don't know if I'm there yet, but at the very least, I'm going to be intrigued because I know he's just going to do some different shit, man.
Well, I mean, like I said, The Witch is one of my all-time favorites. I don't know how to even comprehend The Lighthouse. We all liked The Northman, but none of us loved The Northman. But I mean, it's one of those things, though, that he has shown me he deserves the benefit of the doubt. At this point, he's at least gone to me, watch my movie. Give it a chance.
Yeah.
You might not love it, but you should watch it. I'll go, okay.
Yeah. That's very true. Like I was just thinking that about The Witch because it's such an like unnerving, unsettling movie, but you love it. Like, how do you not like want to know what's about to happen? Like, it's just so well done,
And one of my favorite things about The Witch, and spoilers for The Witch, if you haven't listened or watched The Witch, I don't know, fix yourself, go watch it. And I don't know, maybe skip 30 seconds. I love how the whole movie really is like up in the air. What is going on? What's real? What's not? And instead of doing the thing where you get a definitive answer, he spearheads his way into this is the end of the, you know what I mean? The end of the movie is just it's an unapologetic, here is the devil. Like at the end of the movie. And I loved that thing. It's like, it's not that I needed a definitive answer in that movie. I just loved the fact that in the end he goes, no, it was the devil. But also maybe not.
We're going there.
But like, it still works as it's not. But the end is still the devil. Like, the whole paranoia from the whole family legitimately could have not been the devil the whole time. But it could be the devil went, hey, all that shit happened. That's crazy. But I'm here. You're like, okay. And I don't know. Something about that movie and the look of the goat. I love that fucking goat. He is one of the most magnificent goats that's ever been committed to film.
Philip.
Oh, I love it. Black Phillip.
Black Phillip.
Oh, yeah. Dude, that movie's just, it's so underrated to me. Like anybody, like I said, that has never seen The Witch, fix yourself. Because you're wrong. But anyway, into this movie. I didn't love this movie. But I think it's because I missed something. And I think you actually answered it for me, Jastin. And it was what Nosferatu or Count Oleg or whatever the fuck his name is, was supposed to be in this movie. He wasn't the sexy vampire that seduced the character or was the tragic backstory Dracula that made you feel pity and fall in love, even if it was a corrupted love, if you will. He was just a malevolent force that she knew she had a love for, but knew it was wrong. And she hated that she loved him. And I think I missed that when I watched it, is that, like, I got those points, but just the sheer point that that's just absolutely what it was. That it was just, he is a monster. He's
a fucking predator in this, bro.
An unholy being.
Yeah.
And the love for him is just 100%. I mean, I know I just said it, but unholy. There's not an ounce of real love or anything in it. It is just pure corruption and infection. And I think that part is what I kind of missed when I watched it, is that it was 100% corrupt. And I think it's because we've all seen 90 billion fucking vampire movies where there's just like a shred of goodness or a shred of tragedy.
There's always a shred, man.
If it's like a millimeter of it. And I think that I was trained to go, it's missing that. You know what I mean? So it didn't feel right because of that. But I think when the way you said it, Jastin, I was like, no, that was the point. He was the plague. It's an infection. It's a disease. There is no good to be found no matter how you want to twist it. Nobody goes, oh, you have the flu. At least it's the flu and you're lucky because you got the flu. No, it's an infection. It's always bad no matter what it is. There's no good infections really. You know, we have symbiotic relationships with things. You know, we have bacteria and whatnot in our, you know, gastrointestinal system right now. That's a symbiotic relationship. It's not an infection. This was just pure corruption and evil and an unholy malevolence that had taken hold of her. So anytime she had an attraction or a fondness or whatever for him, it was wrong, and even she knew it. But it was so embedded in her that it was unavoidable. She couldn't stop it. And like I said, I think, looking for the shred and felt off because the shred was missing. Until you said what you said. I was like, that's what it was. That's why I did think it was slightly off when I watched the movie. And it's because I've been trained to. I mean, I know everybody makes fun of it, but even one of the biggest franchises in the world was Twilight. It was always look for the shred of goodness. Look for this, look for that. You know what I mean? It's always look for the shred. Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'll say this with Robert Eggers. At least he had the, wherewithal to just not even bother with it. Because why do you need that? Like, looking back, I'm like, why do you need that?
Yeah.
Things can just be
more
evil.
People see him the way Eggers sees him.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. Like, even like the versions of Dracula or the vampire that I like even the Castlevania Dracula had some shreds.
Oh yeah, from even like the anime.
Yeah.
That we watched, when it's all, I know I'm evil, but this one woman loved me, but you killed her.
Yeah.
And so now I'm evil for everybody. I was going to leave you the fuck alone, but you killed my wife. So fuck you. I'm now going to show you evil. And yes, he was evil, but he had to have a justification to his evil.
Yep. The justification is the shred. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, we don't need that. Like, why do we need that? Like, isn't part of storytelling sometimes just the fact that things are evil sometimes? Like, isn't that one of the most classic fucking stories that's ever been written? Sometimes there's some evil shit out there. Like, I mean, even if you look at something like the Bible, I mean, they're just like, the devil's evil. Like, sometimes things are just evil. And I get that sometimes you can tell a more compelling story if you make the villain sympathetic, but also sometimes can't they just be Jason? Like, I know he's got a sympathetic story, kind of, but also he just walks around murdering motherfuckers. He's just evil. Like, can't we just have that? I mean, even in fucking Blade Trinity, they're trying to make Dracula sympathetic and like, why? I blame you, Hollywood. I blame you. But back to everything else. I mean, my biggest complaint about this is, even if it isn't technically a, complete recreation of Dracula or whatever, the book, it's still just a Dracula story. It's still the Dracula story. It's still, was it Alan Harkin or whatever goes to fucking Transylvania, and then, Renfield's here, and then he comes and falls in love with Mina, but he kills Mina's best friend first, and it's still that story. And, you have Von Frank, and instead of Van Helsing, they really did not try on that name. Like, it's still fucking Dracula. It is still that story at its core. There's some minor differences here and there, but it's that. That's what the story is. And I'm not going to lie, we have been slightly beaten to death with that story. And it doesn't matter how well acted, how well, how good it looks, all these different things. That's literally a story that's been around for 130 years, 140 years. It's we've seen every version of that still. And that's kind of the biggest negative of this, is it's still just that at its core. and you can make it look amazing, and you can have it acting amazing, and you can have probably one of the best literal evil translations of Dracula on screen. It's still just that story, though, that we've literally seen so many times. And that, unfortunately, just, I think that that's what kept me from, in general, just really, really latching on to this movie. Because there's just no surprise. There's no real payoff. Because it's the same payoff I've seen a billion times.
Yeah, and I think, and that was something else I was going to mention in this section too, is that like it's the fact that, and I think I've mentioned this in our previous vampire ones, the vampires aren't really my thing in general, and so the Dracula story is just kind of whatever to me. Like it's interesting, and there's fascinating elements, and the way that they, depending on the version you get, it can be really like fascinating to see what plays out and how they paint this character. But overall, I think that's why like I'm never really drawn in fully to like the Dracula story. You know what I mean? So I feel like that did kind of take away, and like you said, Sterling, like that was kind of a negative, I think, for me, just because preference wise, this is not like my cup of tea on a normal basis. You know what I mean? So I do get what you're saying. And like, even if you are a fan, like if you've seen it done so many times and you're getting the same plot points, no matter what, in a sense, I can see why it would just be like, it's just another Dracula.
So I did look it up. It came out in 1897. So it is 127 years of that story. And it's a very popular story. Like, let's also be realistic about it. It is one of the most popular stories ever written when you really look at it. I mean, that's why we get Dracula fucking everything. I mean, Dracula is so ingrained into our fucking culture. It's a chocolate kid cereal. Like, what else is there, really? You know? And, like, that's just my biggest negative with this movie is it's just, at its core, it's still just Bram Stoker's Dracula. And, yeah, you can dress it up real fancy and all kinds of other stuff, but that's what it is in the end. And I'm not going to lie, parts of it were very, very slow. Now, I do think thematically the slowness and the pacing works, because this is not one of those movies where it's like slow to build to something. This movie is slow because it is about impending and unstoppable dread. And it is about the weight of that. And so when you're dreading something, time kind of slows to a stop. And that's what this, I think one of the reasons, at least to me, why this movie paces itself that way is because nobody really gets amped up because they're feeling dread. You know, like it's a counterintuitive thing. You don't get pumped up. You don't act with a real sense of urgency. You don't do those things when you're filled with dread. Like that is one of those emotions that just weighs on you. And to me, that's why the pacing would be that slow, or was that slow. Because that's what the movie was about. Or not about, but that there was the feeling that they wanted to give with it. Is because, you know, he's there and it's like an unstoppable thing and this and that. And they don't even know what it is for most of the movie. And so it's just that what's around the next corner every fucking time. And it's like, you know, something's there. It's not even that you're like, ooh, what's there? You know something's there. And you're just like, fuck, what's around this corner? And then it's something bad. And you're like, man. And you keep walking and you go, oh, what's around this corner? And then it's something bad. And you're like, man. And it's just that over and over again. Like I said, that's the dread. That's the weight of it that really just kind of works in that regard. So while I felt it in the pacing, it bothered me a little bit. It's not an inescapable thing because it at least felt like it was intentional. You know, when you're watching something like Craven and it feels so ungodly slow at times, that's just because it's a shit movie. Like, that's just because they didn't know, like, it was just poorly made. Whereas at least with this, it's intentional. Like, it might be to the point to where you feel it, and maybe that affects you negatively when it comes to your, like, enjoyment or whatever of the movie. But I can at least walk away from it going, at least there was a purpose. And you know what? I'll always take that, even if I don't love it. You know, I don't necessarily want to watch a really slow 2-hour movie. That weighs on me a lot. But at least when I can justify it in the end, okay.
And that's fair. Like, and that, and just to jump in here, because this was another thing I wanted to make a point about was that I also like felt like this was a slow paced movie. And that was probably for me, the biggest complaint I would have about it. It did feel slow. And I think it's interesting because you make a point about it being intentional. And I feel like anything they do that's a little bit slower paced with the count that's actually, I think that adds to the story. I think that's really cool when they kind of slow play everything he's saying, everything he's doing, and just it's part of the reveal and the mystery of this character, which is really cool. But that being said, I feel like just the story beyond that was also slow played just a little bit too much. And so it did a little bit take me out of enjoying it as much as I would have liked to, because it almost felt like it was only at the one pace. And then it also just sort of abruptly changes at the end too for me. But like so I'm with you that it felt slow, and I think the pacing was a little bit off for me.
Do you have a thought about the pacing, Jastin? We're just all talking about it.
Yeah. No, I think I get kind of both sides of what you guys are saying as far as like, yeah, it felt like a pace that was deliberate like that, especially since this is kind of like a plague Dracula. Like they wanted him synonymous with the plague and an impending doom and death coming for you, and it's slowly getting there. It's coming, and like you said, Sterling, that sense of dread and everything, and you've got these characters like, oh no, we got to prepare for him. How are we going to stop him? What are we going to do about it? And this whole time, he's coming. So yeah, I agree with you that it probably was intentional because they wanted you to feel that impending sense of dread. So if that is something you kind of enjoy, if you can get with that and enjoy that, then you'll be fine. But if you are somebody who is more used to your Dracula or maybe your dark movies or your scary movies doing a lot more, and there's a lot more activity and there's a lot more things happening, then yeah, I could see that being a turnoff for people. I don't think it was a bad thing. I'm kind of a person like I don't care about something being fast or slow. My big thing is why. Does it help the narrative? Does it play in the story? Does it, if I feel like it has a purpose, I'm going to be fine with it. If I feel like it sucks or it's dragging or I see no point in the slow, that's where it's really going to bother me. But I'm kind of in your camp, Sterling. If I can see the justification for it and I see the artistic reasoning behind it, I'm probably going to be okay with it. What I will say, though, is what felt a little disjointed for me is anytime I was in the presence of Dracula or anytime or Count Orlok, anytime Orlok was...
Say what he is. He's fucking Dracula. It's fine.
Yeah, it's whatever, you know. It's basically interchangeable at this point. But anytime I was in the presence of Orlok, anytime Orlok was narrating, anytime Orlok was doing something or praying or on someone, or anytime Orlok was involved, I was really having a good time. And man, his voice and the way that they projected, I love those scenes where it's just him narrating shit or saying shit or commanding shit while you're watching a montage of shit. Those are all my favorite parts. When Dracula's not there, though, admittedly, it's not as good. It's not. And my favorite scenes were Dracula scenes and Lily Rose Depp scenes. To me, those are the best scenes, when it's one of them two or they're interacting with each other. Everything beyond that, I did feel a dip in quality of what was happening. And maybe it had to be that way because they can't be there the whole time, but you do miss them when they're not there. You know, I will agree with that. And a lot of that middle, it doesn't involve them because we're introducing other characters and they got to get involved and they're figuring things out and they're becoming a part of this story. And I do think that is where the movie is not as interesting as when those other characters are involved. So I will say I did feel that for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that probably is where you feel it the most too. Yeah, I get that. I mean, at this point, recommendations and scores.
Yeah.
Yep.
Recommendations and score.
Heather, what you got?
Yeah, I don't see a reason to not recommend it, especially if you are into vampire lore, if you're into Dracula lore, things like that. Yeah, I think this is going to be a good watch. Similar to what Jastin said, like this is easily one of the better vampire stories and movies we've gotten in at least more recent years that I can think of. So, yeah, and honestly, for Bill Skarsgård's performance alone, I think it is worth going to see this movie. He does a lot of really cool things with the character to make it what it is. So yeah, I think that it is, I would say it's definitely a good enough movie to recommend. However, on my end, I think it's just a fine movie overall with, it's very artistically beautiful and the acting is solid, but the story and all of that just in general, it's fine for me. It's just fine. It's not a great movie, but it's pretty good, I would say. So I'm going to give it a 73 rooms full of cats out of 100.
Jastin, what about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's at the very least, it's good enough to recommend. It's not poorly made. It doesn't have any bad performances. It's not a story that is confusing or not told well or anything like that. So I think that because it's just on its own merits, a good enough and a well-made enough film, I can at least recommend it on those merits. I don't think anybody will think it's bad. I do agree with what you said earlier, Sterling, about the fact that this is a story that, especially if you're somebody who likes these Dracula stories or has seen these Dracula stories or has kind of seen all these different versions of the Bram Stoker Dracula. Yeah, I do agree with you on that. It's pretty much the same story with no surprises. Even if you saw the first Nosferatu or the remake Nosferatu, it pretty much follows that same formula to a T with no surprises. So I do think, you know, so I would say if somebody were to ask me, is this a masterpiece? I could say no because of those things. It doesn't do enough different from those stories to separate itself like that. But kind of to what Heather was saying, but I do think it's pretty good. I do think it's really good because it might be one of the best versions of this story I've seen. So I think that says something for it, at least. Like, out of all these iterations, out of all these stories, out of all the times this story has been told, this might be the best version of it that I've seen. Just as far as execution, the acting performances, the look of it, and the way Dracula is positioned. I like when compared to all these other versions, I like the balls to just kind of say, nope, he's a motherfucker and he's a predator, and this is what he's going to do in this movie. He's just going to be that. He's just going to be an evil plague bastard, and that's all he's going to be. So I kind of like that. So yeah, but you're right, Sterling. If you're looking for something different story-wise, you're not going to get it. Those people are going to be disappointed. But if you like this shit, if you're a Dracula fan and you like these stories, well then shit, you're going to be right at home. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't like this one. If you like all those other ones, if you like Bram Stoker's, you'll like this one. I mean, I think that's fair enough to say. So, with that being said, I think it's good enough to be at least a B. So we'll go, I don't know, 85. Man, what do I even want to say for this? I don't know, 85. Children eating good times out of 100.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah,
I recommend it. I like the way you said it, Jastin. It probably is the best version of this story that you've heard a billion times. It's just at a certain point, they all do bleed together. Like, I'm just like, it's all the same shit to me at this point. Like, I mean, I think to truly, truly enjoy this movie, you have to be a fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, like that story, to truly just love this movie. I think if you like vampires, you'll still probably really like this movie.
Well, that dark goth shit. I mean, if you're a person in all that goth shit with the whole, oh my, you know what I'm talking about. Those people that just like that dark shit, man, they'll love this shit. They'll jerk off to this shit. Oh, my body and is yours, and the darkness, it consumes me. Man, people who like that shit, man, they'll love this shit. They'll just be in their orgasm into all this dark shit. You know they are.
You know what? That's a very astute observation, Jastin. It really is. And I just really think it's funny because, like, in general, that's like what some people do think about me sometimes with, like, you know, the evil stuff. And it's like, it's so much of my shit, just like in general, like, I've got a blanket and it's just like weird demonic cat heads and shit like that. And like, so I've got a lot of stuff that is just like, you know, it's that evil devil shit. I really enjoy that type of stuff. But like, I'm just still not that person where I'm like, but the darkness needs to take my soul. Like, I'm still not that. I just think aesthetically speaking, devil shit's cool.
I don't remember you ever talking like that.
You know, I'm just like, devil shit's cool. Like, that's it. Like, I just like demons and shit. But even then, I will say this, my cat blanket that's like it really is demonic cats all over it. The cats are neon colored. So it's still not that dark. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's still that level of separation. I mean, I'm sitting here in a light blue plaid or like, you know, flannel shirt. You know what I mean? I'm not that like aesthetically evil, I would say. But yeah, I just didn't think about that. The people just, oh, the dark one needs to take my soul. Just take my body and do with it what you will, Dark Lord. I forgot about those people.
Yeah. And you know they're going to be all up on the shit. And I'm not even trying to make fun of them or anything. I'm just saying there are really people like that.
Yeah,
that this is just they will love this shit. This will be their kind of movie.
Yeah.
The Dark Prince coming to get you and all that shit. And I'm going to need you to submit to me and all that shit. Some people going to be like, sure, Daddy Skarsgård, yes.
It'll be the first time somebody didn't call him Baby Skarsgård on this podcast.
Right.
No, but that's fair, Jastin. That's a whole subset of people, of moviegoers I forgot about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, 100%. And you know what? Say what you will about this. This is the most consent-obsessed Dracula we've ever gotten. I mean, he might be an evil motherfucker, but he still understands consent is key. Fair enough.
He may groom you to do it, but that consent is key.
Hey, he needs it. I mean, he spent so much of this movie going, I need that consent.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know what? Fair enough. A lot of Draculas out there aren't even worried about that shit. So, you know what? Kudos to you. You might be the most evil Dracula, but you understand there's lines you don't cross.
Be a predator, but get that consent. Yeah.
Fair. I mean, I had a lower score for it, but I did raise my score a little bit after what we talked about earlier with what you helped pinpoint for me, Jastin. But yeah, I do recommend it. There's there's nothing really Robert Eggers does that I wouldn't recommend. Like even The Northman, I'm like, yeah, go watch it. Like, it's a fine movie. I kind of keep forgetting it exists, but once I remember it, I'm like, yeah, go watch it. Like there's worse things you can watch. I mean, if you just want to see muscled up people and you have a choice between The Northman and Craven, it's a clear winner. All the muscles and not a shitty movie. Yeah, this movie's fine. I mean, I really enjoyed it aesthetically. I mean, this is like, regardless of whatever you feel about most of the movie, whatever, it is probably one of the most aesthetically impacting movies I've seen in a very long time. I mean, if you want to ever just figure out just how to do your style in a movie, I'm not saying rip him off, but he's a good a good reference for showing style in a movie. I mean, that's one thing this movie has in almost an inescapable way. There is just a definitive style to every single thing in this movie. And I looked it up, Jastin. You were absolutely right. This was shot on 35 millimeter film. And you know what? That probably does add to it too.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, you know what my favorite scene was in this movie? It was towards the end when the Mina character, because I don't remember any of the motherfuckers in this movie's name outside of Van Frank, because I'm like, wow. But like the Mina character, the Lily Rose Depp, whatever the fuck her name was.
Ellen.
Sure, it's Mina.
But yes, Mina, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, basically.
But that scene where she's like, when she's finally like, come to me, and it's just that shadowy hand going over the city. Oh, that was a fucking amazing scene.
That was the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great fucking scene.
That was raw.
Like, just that alone, like, you just show somebody that, like, that's how you do it. It's just a shadowy fucking hand going over the whole fucking landscape all the way to her window. Oh, that's fucking great.
Yeah, just the symbolism of that in so many ways. Like, it's just really, going to her from across wherever, but also the plague he's putting over the entire people that has his hands over is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just really fucking great. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of split the difference between you guys a little bit. I'm gonna go 78. 78. PETA is up in arms about this movie because they're like, rats are intelligent creatures and they don't spread plague. And I'm sorry, PETA, but you're wrong. Rats are historically known to have spread plague. I mean,
Yeah,
facts.
I thought that was just known.
I mean, you can say what you will. It's the fleas on the rats. Okay, but you know, the fleas aren't getting around if the rats aren't there. So, I mean, while the rats themselves don't have the plague, they are helping spread it. Like, I get why you're like, you don't want them to have a bad image, but also don't lie. Like, don't just sit there and lie about it, PETA. I was waiting the whole fucking podcast to bring that up. Because when I found that out, when like PETA's like, rats don't spread the plague. I'm like, yeah, now. Because we kind of got rid of it. Like, they're forgetting the end of that sentence of they're not spreading the plague now. Because we got rid of the plague, essentially. And it's essentially, it does actually pop up here and there. You guys know that the bubonic plague actually pops up every once in a while? It's okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Modern medicine is actually very effective against the plague. I get that it killed like, what, a third of the known world or whatever at the time, but modern medicine really has the plague figured out. CineScore on this is a 79. Spoilers?
Yep.
Yep.
Spoilers.
I mean, I don't really feel like I'm going to have too terribly much to say in spoilers just because it's Dracula. Like, everyone, like, most people have seen this movie. We know it. Like, you know, we've talked about it weirdly enough a few times on this podcast when it comes to Dracula Dead and Loving It. That's still this story, and it's a stupid little silly comedy. You know, we still know the story.
Didn't you say that was your favorite one or one of your favorites?
Oh, it's up there. I fucking love that movie.
I watched that so much when I was younger.
Yeah, hence why she is the best Mina. I don't know what it was about that woman. I fucking loved her, dude.
I know. What is it about that woman?
Oh, dude. I loved her in Problem Child. I was like, I know she was evil and all, but God. And then she's in fucking The Mask. She's in Wings. Oh, she was so beautiful in Wings. She's just this woman I was madly in love with as a child. I mean, if you probably asked me back in the day, it probably was like Topanga, maybe Yasmin Bleeth, / the entire cast of Baywatch. And then Amy Yasbeck. Oh my God. Man, you telling me you did not get some sort of feeling when you saw her all as Maid Marian in Robin Hood Men in Tights? Oh man.
I don't know. I just didn't have a crush on her. I think she looks good. Yeah. I mean, she's pretty.
I forgot she was in The Mash.
That woman made me feel things. That's all I'll say. Made me feel things.
Is this your Nicole Kidman?
It could be.
I don't know. That might be accurate. I'm trying to think. Because it's got to be the woman that is like drastically old. Like, not drastically. That's very unfair to all of them.
That was
that was utterly uncalled for on my part. Because I don't know why I said that. But just someone
drastically old.
I said that word and I'm like, why did I say that?
Dust.
It was instant regret on my part.
Like, if you touched her, she would just evaporate into dust.
That's honestly, I think what happened in my head is I was thinking of her current age, but I was a child. Like, I don't know. That was wildly inappropriate on my part. I am so sorry. Just that age gap. You know what I mean? So like somebody that was like full grown woman when I was child, you know, so I can't count a Danielle Fishel. I can't count a Jennifer Love Hewitt. You know, that's obviously not that. It might be.
Although I get it with Jennifer Love Hewitt. Damn.
That woman has a stranglehold on my heart. And she always will. I watched The Holiday Junkie for that woman. That's right. I watched a Lifetime Christmas movie because I love her. I watched all 5 seasons of The Ghost Whisperer. Do you know what no other human being has ever done? Watched all of The Ghost Whisperer.
Man.
Watching it for that plot, huh?
Yes. And that plot is just Melinda, ghost whispering. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, this movie is, it's Dracula. Okay. I don't really know what you could possibly spoil about Dracula at this point. You know, it is that utterly so. I mean, I think I'll talk about some of the specifics, though. I mean, Willem Dafoe was great in this. I loved it because there was just this slight hint, this ever so slight, like an essence or a waft of almost overacting from him. But it really fit. Like, because his character was the eccentric. It was the believer when no one else believed. You know what I mean? And so I think it really added to that. There's some like weird historical accuracies for some of these things. So like the fact that he had a bunch of cats weirdly makes sense for the type of person he was, because there's this weird historical connection with cats, and very specific, the plague. So like a couple of reasons why back in the day when the plague was like killing everybody and all this other stuff, that people thought like women were witches, is because it was very common for, like, if it was a single woman, that she would have a cat or something like that. That was just a very common thing. Well, what do cats do? They kill fucking rats. And rats don't like being around them. So what ends up happening? The women with cats don't get the fucking plague. And what does everybody else do? Oh, they're witches. They're cursing us with the plague.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird historical thing of, since he was the one that was like the vampire hunter, if you will, and, you know, Dracula is very much connected to the idea of plague. In this, it makes sense that he would have cats, because cats kept the plague at bay, which means they kept the vampire, the Nosferatu, away. You know, so that's like a really nice little, like, historical connection to people with cats and plague, which are very much a big theme in this movie.
That's interesting.
But it's also very makes sense with the Mina character, because what did she want to stop within herself? The plague.
Yeah.
And what did she have? A cat. She was trying to ward away the plague that had been in her, like a part of her soul for most of her life. So she would have a cat to keep, you know, that type of thing away. And so there's like a connection there. And so it's those like little historical elements of things that were subtle details in this movie. And plus, you know, her cat really looked a lot like a bigger version of my Lilith, so I loved it. Nice little cute tabby with a little kitten face. And that's what she is. So that's double kudos on that. Yeah, so that's a nice little historical thing that I really kind of enjoyed that was subtle in this movie. Also, that was one of the crazier things I've seen in a movie that really adds to the thematic elements we've talked about throughout this. Those scenes where you're just walking down the street and there's just rats everywhere. And like, if you look in the background, there's just like rats running down the alley. There's like one scene where there's just like a body. There's just a rat just fucking eating on it. And they're standing there talking. And this rat's just on this body. And shit like that. And I'm like, that's fucking crazy. Like, and also, yeah, the Demeter scene was real nice. Really succinct and to the point. People were there. They were getting the plague and getting eaten by a Dracula. Really, the only thing you need from a Demeter ever? And, you know, this version of Dracula kind of fits that better because he was like, there's at least a human element to him, and which makes it more sinister. Like, I really liked that scene when the guy's like going through the hole, like the hole of the ship, and he's like, oh, look, the coffin. And he's like, oh, it's the rats. But if you notice while he's walking, you can see Dracula's shoulder to the side.
Yeah, you could see it to the side. Yeah, you could see him kind of move. Yeah.
Yeah, he walks right by him. And you see him move. And then he's like, ah, the rats. Ah, Dracula. How the fuck do you have that scene and it's better than your whole goddamn movie? Like, it's just what we call effective filmmaking. But also, even then, like, when you look at this guy, I like some of the choices they made when it comes to the visual of the Dracula. Or in this case, I guess the Nosferatu, if you will. Because they kept some of the elements, like the really long, gangly body, the fingernails that were more or less talons, you know, and all this stuff. I liked the addition of just a mustache, though. Because it made him feel more Eastern European.
That is in the book.
Yeah, but it just feels more of the place, you know? It makes him feel like he was a person at one point that just got corrupted. Whereas Nosferatu just looks like a monster. This feels like a person that has just been infected and corrupted and rotting and all of those things. Like, it really kind of adds to that. I really kind of...
And for what it's worth, he kind of looked like Vlad the Impaler.
Well,
a little bit.
And that's why I'm saying is like, he just at least looks Eastern European.
Yeah.
You know,
looked,
like,
that way. Yeah.
Because Gary Oldman totally rocks the mustache and stuff too. Mm-hmm. Because it's just one of those things, but he rocks it in that very stylized, posh British mustache. Whereas in this, that is the mustache of a man from the Caspian Mountains. Just deep in the mountains, you know, and you feel it. Like, anytime you see that Russian mustache, it's kind of that. So I really kind of dug that. There was a very good look for that. And I mean, Lily Rose Depp was fine. I'm always going to be slightly bummed about her in this movie, though, because it was originally supposed to be Anya Taylor-Joy, and there was a scheduling conflict, and that's why she wasn't in it. And so, as good as she was, I'm always just going to be thinking, but we could have had Anya Taylor-Joy. And that's just always a sad little note for me.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
I think it was Mad Max. I think because of the production schedule or something got shifted. I think it was Mad Max that kind of took her out of this.
Did not know that. Very interesting.
Yeah. Outside of that, though, I mean, yeah, I do have to agree with you guys. Bill Skarsgård. I mean, you could have also told me that was just some random Russian motherfucker, and I wouldn't have disagreed. I don't even know really how to comprehend that, because I just see nothing of him there. You at least see elements of him in Pennywise. I don't see any of him in this fucking thing. Even the way they did the voice, you know what I mean? Everything. Like, I'm like, he is gone. There's just not an ounce of Skarsgård you see.
Yep.
Which is also a weird choice to me, because why do you want to hide a Skarsgård? I mean, it's a choice.
The Northmen did not hide a Skarsgård.
See, you know Robert Eggers knows how to use a Skarsgård. I mean, is he just subtly telling us that he thinks that other Skarsgård is like more attractive than Bill? He's like, Bill, you're gross. We're going to put you in all the ugly makeup. We got to hide that alien physique. No, your brother, though. We need to see every ounce of that man's skin.
Poor Bill.
I know, he's really,
and he is not unattractive, but yeah, it's like he's always like this weird looking villain creature.
But I don't know what it is about this family. They can just have 6% body fat on a whim. It's absurd.
And aren't they all really tall?
Yeah.
As far as I think.
Because they are all literal Viking people.
Like, Bill Skarsgård is like 6'4". He's very tall.
I want to say his oldest brother's the baby of the family at 6'2". It's shit like that.
That's crazy.
They're just ungodly tall people, which I guess totally works in this film, because he just towers over everybody, and it's not even close. And maybe it's been a while since I've seen, or not seen, but like read Dracula or whatever. But the one thing I really did dig about the end, though, is when they go to the castle and they rip open the coffin and he just stabs in, and it's just Renfield. And Renfield's just like, I'm dying. I'm so evil and corrupted. Thank you for killing me. I was like, that's a choice. And I'm not talking about the movie. I'm just talking about what he said. He's just like, now you realize it's bad once you get stabbed. You're like, I made bad life choices. So that guy was weirdly great too. Just the frantic, crazed nature that he portrayed was really great. That was a very good version of Renfield. I would argue better than Nicholas Holt's Renfield.
He wasn't frantic enough.
Yeah. I think you'd be making a good argument.
I just don't.
That scene where he was like naked in the cell, wherever he was, with all the candles and the book and saying whatever, and then he turned around and he was just, I was like, damn, dude.
And then he's just sitting there biting pigeons' heads.
Yeah.
In front of,
I like the tease of that. I like how it teased it and he didn't do it. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's not going to happen. I went, oh shit, okay. We're doing it.
And he's just, and they're
doing it.
And they're just like, oh man, he escaped. This man's just running naked down the streets and nobody fucking caught. Like, how do you not catch that man? He is like running naked down the street, yelling. He was not being secretive at all. He was not doing a Metal Gear Solid. He was not stealthy doing shit. He's just screaming down the street and everybody's like, and it's like a day and a half later, because they like noticed the next afternoon. It wasn't even in the morning. What kind of hospital is this? And they're just like, hey, I guess bro got out, man. Like, how did you not know? Yeah, there's a lot of elements of this movie to love. And like I said, my two biggest complaints are not even really spoilery, because it's Dracula. And at times it's slow. And I think you are right, Jastin. I think that those are the times you feel it the most. Like the slowness and stuff like that is when it's just everyone else. Like, and it's not even against this man, but like, what's his name? Aaron Taylor Johnson. Like, he was fine in this movie.
Yeah.
I
Definitely
also-
better here than in Craven.
But I also just didn't care. Like, that was the problem, is maybe this came out too close to Craven, that I can't separate it. Where I'm like, you're doing better, buddy, but you're still Craven. And I'm still mad at you for that. I'm still mad that you made me watch your fucking movie. And so you have this man, and I at least don't even get to see his muscles.
You didn't care about his circumstances?
No. At least show me this man. You want me to
You didn't
care?
care about the series of
a little
unfortunate
bit.
events that befell him?
Some of that was his fault. Let's be real. And all I mean by that is his wife legitimately has the plague. And he's just like, okay, honey, let's go to bed in the same bed with your plague-ridden ass. Come on. I get you love your wife, bro, but you can't be in the plague bed. You have like 97 rooms in your house. Go to any of the other rooms. Why are you and your daughters on the same floor as the plague? Jesus. That's weird.
You know what else is kind of weird about him? His random laugh. His like he was just doing a very strange laugh.
I don't know. Maybe I didn't find that weird because I just feel like in my soul that that's just what weird old British people did.
Yeah. Just like
Yeah. If you were just like, you know, it's like the thing you see in movies where they're like, and then I hit a poor person. Like, just that. Like,
yeah.
And I also get that none of these people are technically supposed to be British because this totally takes place in Germany. But let's also be real. That is the most British Germantown that's ever existed. Not a single motherfucker tried to do any German whatsoever.
And I mean, the majority of the cast is from the UK as well. So.
Oh, yeah. Like, they are all British people, but like, they didn't even have the gumption to try to do any German whatsoever. They were just like, it felt like they were playing like ancient Greeks with how much British they were putting on. Because like, that's the old way of doing things. It's like, oh, it's the ancient Greeks. They all need to be British as fuck. It felt like that. Like, oh man, this is old Germantown. The more British, the better. And then let's throw a random American woman in there. That makes sense. But yeah, like that's what was just so jarring to me is that like they were just so British. And like I just kept being so confused by that. Because like the only German person was like one of the old guys that worked at the office that Nicholas Hoult showed up to when they're like, you're late. Like that was the only time there was a German person in this movie. And they were like, you know, just being German. And then like the boss wasn't German. Like, and they would use like the German, they would use some of the German words. And I think that maybe that's what was so distracting to me. Because you had people saying like Herr and Frau, which is like Mr. and Mrs. in German. But in a British accent. So like, it was so jarring to me there to be like, oh, you know, Herr Taylor Johnson or where the fuck that guy's name was. And it's like, well, why are you British? Driving me nuts.
Yeah, Friedrich.
Whatever. That guy exists to die. I don't need to learn his name. Kind of like his wife. What was his wife's name? It doesn't matter what his wife's name was.
Anna, but yes.
The woman that dies to Dracula. I mean, I will say this. At least the big change from Dracula is that, like, you know, he wasn't fucking the friend. Like he does in most Dracula stories. He just eats her. You know, that's fair. But also, okay, final thing. Real quick question. This has been on my mind since I watched the movie. Did Aaron Taylor Johnson's character fuck his dead wife?
That was my assumption based on just how they found him with her at the end there.
I mean, I thought he kissed her and then killed himself.
I mean, maybe.
Or did the kiss, or did he kiss her so the plague killed him? I mean, I wasn't sure, but I think he killed himself.
Well, he already had the plague. Like, it shows him.
That's right. He already had it. So he just was going there to die.
Yeah, which is because he was lying in the plague bed. You know?
Yeah.
I just yeah, whenever they find him, he's weirdly on top of his wife after he made out with her corpse.
Yeah, and like her body was out of the casket and her legs were like over the side of it. So that's why I thought that was what happened.
I mean, if it is what happens, I'm glad they burned his corpse. Heather, what about you?
Yeah, I think I will say that I liked the secondary story with the friends like Friedrich and Anna and them, because there was this, and to be fair, I don't remember enough about the other Dracula movies off the top of my head to remember if like Friedrich or Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, he doesn't really like Ellen. Like, he's not really a fan of her. And I don't know if that was something that was particularly in the other ones, but I think that was an interesting element to add here, or an interesting element to have in this, because it kind of adds to that tone of like, he's frustrated and he needs to place his blame somewhere because he doesn't know what's going on. He's confused. He doesn't know what to think. And so it's just very easy to blame her because he's not really a fan of her in the first place. So I think that was a good story element to sort of add that tension between, you know, the fact that it's these people looking after her and they're unfortunately getting the bad end of the deal because of knowing her and being around her and all of this while she's having these nightmares and these things happening to her with Dracula. So I did like that element of it. And I do think it's the off-putting part, and I know it's intentional, but it is just off-putting because, like you guys said, he's a dark, like horrible, evil creature. And he's a predator, like you said. But I mean, it was just like that grooming aspect of it, because I mean, she talks about how when she was a child, she would call to him and or she would call out for something, and you know, they found each other, and like how it started out being very sweet and then it turned into something else, and like very like horrific things to think about for like a child to be experiencing, and how she's like, oh, I've had my melancholy for, you know, since I was a little girl or whatever it was she said. And that aspect is so off-putting because you're just like, this is not, like you guys said, this is not specifically a version I've heard of this Dracula before, where he's just like grooming a child, unless I just don't remember correctly. But granted, also, like at this time, 16-year-old brides were probably common. So unfortunately, but yeah, it's just the aspect and that added element of just how like dangerous and evil this man is, or this creature is, because like he's just like, no, like I have to have you, and like corrupting basically a child. And then, you know what I mean? It's just that element. It makes sense to add it if you're really just showing like how depraved and just that there's no shred of good in him, like you were saying earlier. It is something that is effective in that way to make his character do and to have this Dracula be. But that being said, obviously, it's just it's hard to like know that when you watch this movie, especially knowing what she's going through and like what it does to her when he calls to her and all these things. So yeah, it was just that was an off-putting element, but I understand why they did it, because it was effective, you know, because it makes you outraged. It makes you be like, this is like horrifying. We need to save this woman from whatever's happening. So yeah, it adds to that idea of the impending doom and the dread and the there's no way out of this. This darkness is only going to get worse. And so it's a hard story to tell, but like they really did. I guess I'll say that like, they made me not care about this Dracula more, but they made me feel like I understood this Dracula more than others, as far as like, he just wants to do evil things. He's, what is it the Joker says? Like, he just wants to watch the world burn or whatever. But like, it's just, he just doesn't care. He's not he has no, like, he has no allegiance to anybody or anything. And it was interesting to see that in this. But yeah, I mean, but you're right. Like, Sterling, it's Dracula. So it's like, well, what is there to really spoil about this? But another specific is the whole thing about like Ellen having this sort of like psychic ability or whatever it is that kind of allows her to have this connection with Dracula. I liked that element of this story. Is that something they touch on in the book? Or in...
no. That's
okay.
No.
That's just part for this. That's for this.
No, in Dracula, Dracula just thinks Mina's really fucking hot.
Okay.
So
therefore, she also probably wasn't a child in the book, I assume.
Well, but also could have been, because like in 1897, when you're like, hey, my 25-year-old real estate agent has a hot 16-year-old wife, they would all think that's the same, but you know what I mean, back then.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Because I think part of what he is so attracted to when it comes to Mina essentially is also her purity.
Yep.
So it would also, especially, back in the day, that just implies, unfortunately, a young person.
Yep.
And I know in the movie, and now maybe not in the book, but in the movie, the Bram Stoker Dracula movie, after whenever Mina starts to fall for him and stuff, and they have that meeting and he bites her and everything, she does have some sort of psychic connection to him.
Yes.
And she says, oh, he's coming. Like, that's how they were able to track him and then give chase to go back to his castle. So I don't know how accurate it is in the book.
Well,
there might have been an element pulled from some movie versions.
That's kind of an element of vampiric lore. Is that like the master vampire?
Like bite and then you have a connect. Yeah.
Yes. That's kind of, I think, where that comes from. Is that from, because if I'm thinking right, that's in the book too. Because yes, that's how they track Dracula down. But what is it? It's after the bite. And so in this, they're implying that she's kind of at least like, supernaturally gifted or some sort.
Yep.
That she's touched with visions of the future or visions of the supernatural or whatever. And as a child, she did more or less call forth into the supernatural void of,
right.
I need connection with something.
Yep.
And essentially Dracula
answered the call.
And that's why he's been a part of her almost her whole life, is because of that. But it wasn't until he put his machinations together because what did she say? Once they got married, that's when Dracula was like, oh, fuck this.
Yeah.
We're going to be together now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that opening vision that that just I'm guessing that was just a vision then, that opening scene where she calls out to him and he comes and then he's like feeding on her.
Yes.
Was that just like a harbinger vision, or did that happen?
Well, both. It was all in her head. It was like supernaturally mentally happening to her, but that was like Dracula more or less visiting her in her dreams.
Yeah.
So
okay.
that's why
it's she
both.
did say dream. You're right. Yes, she did.
Because she would go sleepwalking. You know what I mean? So she went and sleptwalk right into the garden, and more or less her and Dracula fucked, because she did specifically say at one point, maybe not in that scene, but she did say at one point that like her dad found her naked. and was like,
Yeah.
oh, you're corrupted, and more or less saying that she went and dream fucked Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Which I mean, I like that version of it. That's probably the only real unique thing in this movie. Is
exactly.
That, to be fair, I've never seen the 1979 Nosferatu. But that's a weird Nosferatu because they're like, hey, this is Nosferatu, but it's Count Dracula, it's Mina, it's Jonathan Harkin. You know what I mean? They use all the Dracula names, but they call the movie Nosferatu. So like this one is like a true remake of Nosferatu, which also, by the way, I looked it up. If you have AMC Plus, which I think is also Shudder, you can watch Nosferatu on that.
Oh, okay.
And if you want to see the 1979 one, you can watch that on Peacock. Just throwing that out there to everybody. But yeah, like that might be the most interesting like aspect of anything they brought into this was that, you know, but also I didn't know this, that like the remake of Nosferatu, where like I said, where they're, or like the 1979 was like this, that is also about the plague. So that might be something from the book I don't remember, because like I said, that movie, they're like, hey, it's Count Dracula, it's Mina, it's Lucy, which that's the thing, is the friend in the book, and in the movie it's Lucy, the one that Dracula does have sex with and murders, and she becomes a vampire. That's Lucy. So I don't know, that might be something I don't remember from the book, but that is at least from the 1979 Nosferatu, that they're like, hey, the plague. You've watched it infinitely more recent than I have, Jastin, and I know it's a silent movie, but is there a big thing with rats?
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's rats and there's a plague.
Yeah.
It's not played like he caused it though, or he's sort of like in a way supernaturally kind of helping this along. It's not played that way. It almost, in the silent film, it's almost like the plague is happening, and it's almost like because the town is so distracted with that, that's the ample distraction he needs to get there, get his casket, or his casket where it needs to be, where he can sleep and sort of perch himself before he gets to Ellen. But yeah, it seems more like it's happening, but it's more of a background thing. But because they're so focused on that, they don't see Orlok over here Orlocking, you know. It's more like that. That's how I felt in that when I watched it anyway.
Which, I want to say this though, the Nosferatu synopsis on IMDb is probably one of the greatest things I've ever read. Vampire Count Orlok expresses interest in a new residence and real estate agent Hutter's wife. That is the plot synopsis for Nosferatu. That is amazing.
Nice.
Wow. Nailed it.
Like, it really does sound like it's some weird comedy where like vampires are known, and it's like this guy is like a real estate agent, and he's like, Dracula's like, hey, find me a Dracula house. Hey, and your wife's really hot. And then shenanigans happen.
That would be a funny thing to like redo cuts of the movie with that like theme instead. Because
like the 1979 one, I mean, is like a real synopsis because it's Count Dracula. Once again, like I said, they go back to the real names. It's Count Dracula moves from Transylvania to Weismar, spreading the Black Plague across the land. Only a woman pure of heart can bring an end to his reign of horror. So I don't know, maybe that one also ends close to this one. You know, because like I said, the original Nosferatu, it really is just like the sunlight. And they do like a weird 1920s transition where he fades away when the sunlight hits him. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure you guys also probably, one of you at this point will talk about what the end was at this point. So I won't go into that, but like, yeah. So maybe that one, because it's like a woman pure of heart. Which I guess not, because it's not like they really played what's her name like that in this movie.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, and like, and you make a good point, because that's why I was bringing up the whole like psychic realm thing, because I don't remember seeing that as an element in any of the ones I've seen before. And
yeah, not till they're bitten. Like that's always that's
Yeah.
the common thread in most things. When they've done that aspect of like just a vampire story, but if they're linking it vaguely to Dracula, that's always the case. Somebody's bitten and they can telepathically sense where the other one is and all that stuff. I mean, they do that shit in True Blood. You know, the master vampire, whoever turns the other one, can kind of always sense them. That's
Yep.
something that has been a big thing. And like I said, that does go back all the way to Dracula. Because like Jastin said, that's how they catch him. You
Mhm.
have to like Mina's like, oh, he turned left down this road, and they're like, because it's all a race back to the castle. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and like I think that was a really cool and interesting element in this film, was just that whole idea of like, her saying like, even when I was younger, I could like feel things or sense things or something like that, is what she said. And I just really think that would have been a cool thing to maybe explore a little bit further, like maybe within her marriage, or just something where we see a little bit of it outside of just with Dracula. But I also understand that, it's this spiritual connection to him throughout this, like you said, like the void that she was searching out into. And I think that is like it's a really cool aspect. And like, that is a good reason for it to be like, why her of all people, and I like them sort of touching on that, and that being like a big factor of this, and why she feels it so much, why she feels him so much, and why they have such this strong connection. I just think that was a really cool thing to add into this, and that they could have even touched on that more, because I think that was one of the more interesting elements of the story, or of the movie.
Now, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I do agree. I do think it's weird that they really don't show too much of her having that ability, outside of her sensing some sort of doom with him traveling to Romania. But that's still tied to Dracula. So like, wouldn't it have been just slightly cooler, or at least made a little bit more sense, if they dropped the line of, I used to have visions of the future until I reached out and Dracula answered. And ever since then, it's always been connected to him.
Yep.
Wouldn't that have kind of just given you a way out of her not having visions anymore? Because she doesn't have any, really. And it would have just kind of tied it up a little bit and shown just a little bit more of even their connection of like, he corrupted me so much that this gift or whatever that I had when I was younger is so corrupted now that it's still all about him at this point. Just to kind of interconnect them a little more, just make it a little tighter.
Yep.
In that regard. Because, yeah, like you said, she really doesn't mention anything about having current visions or anything like that. Outside of, that first dream she has right before he has to leave.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that would have made a little bit more sense. Also, what in the blue hell did they like send him on that? They just sent him off with a horse to go across countries.
Good luck. Yeah.
They did. They just go, hey, bro, go. He didn't even have a map, it looked like. He just was like, I guess I'm going. And he just had, I don't know, 1820 GPS or 1920 GPS in his fucking head. Like, he just knew every turn to make to get to that one fucking place. That's crazy. Jastin, what about you? Or, I'm sorry, were you done, Heather?
I had just a little bit more. So yeah, I think that like, and you said it really well earlier, Sterling, about like, I really did like the aspect also with Ellen of she actually hates that he has this hold over her. She hates
I was
that
very
there's
confused on who Ellen was at first.
Oh yeah, Lily Rose Depp, yeah.
Mina.
Yes, Mina. Sorry, I'll just call her Mina. But
If you don't refer to these people as their Dracula names, I get very confused very fast.
fair enough. But yeah, I think that was a really good way to put it, of like, there's this insane hold that he has over her, and it's like she can't help but give into it, but she also just really hates it. And that's so tragic if you think about it too, of just like having pretty much your entire life and your entire marriage just having this thing that has a hold on you that you're just like, I hate it. Like, and wanting her marriage to be the thing that releases that, or that keeps her from having that hold, him having that hold. And even trying to be like, I'm so frustrated at this that, like, you know what? I want him to see the love that I have for my husband and him back. And let's just do it right here and now, where he could see all of it. And just really angry about her being in that situation and almost blaming herself, because she's like, I called out into the void and this is what I got. This is who answered me. And this, basically, it just feels like she's, she blames herself for why it's like this. And I think that that's also why it was probably, she felt it her duty, obviously, aside from the fact that it's like, well, obviously she's the one that he wanted. So she has to be the one to make this happen, to end it all. But also I feel like she probably was like, it started with me. This is my fault. Like, I have to be the one to do this too. And so yeah, I think it's like a beautifully tragic sort of existence that she had. And because you're right, like, I think that there is that element of her that had this purity in her, and she was just longing for, not to be alone. And even in this like situation she's in, and her melancholy that she has and all of these things, like, you still see that she has a good and pure heart, and she wants what's best for her husband and for the people around her. But this one thing is just ruining all of that. And I just think that was a really, it was told really well in this. I do think that aspect was done really well. And something that I had mentioned earlier, like, as much as I do think this movie goes slow, I do think that the ending is very abrupt. And maybe, again, intentional, but it's like there was a huge build up to like, all right, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to get Dracula and all of this. And then when it happens and he goes there to he goes there to Mina and like, it's just like, all right, here I am, take me. And then he's so caught up in, consuming her that he, doesn't realize daylight's coming, and he dies, and that's it. It's just like, whoop. And then that's how she ended the plague spreading more. The end. And it was done. It just felt very abrupt at the end there. So I thought that was an interesting choice, and also sort of colored my perspective of the pacing of the film. But I do think like it was obviously inevitable that this was going to be how it had to end, even if you didn't know like previous stories of Dracula, and this is like the first time you're seeing this. You've seen that story enough to know like she's got to sacrifice. Like, that's just kind of unfortunately what has to happen here. It's going to be a tragic ending. So yeah, I just thought that was like, and I don't hate how they did the ending, because I totally get what they were going for and how he dies and all of these things, but I just was it was a little bit jarring just how quickly it ended right after that happened. So yeah, that was my only sort of like weirdness I had with how they ended it.
Jastin, what about you?
Yeah. I guess like we've all said earlier, it's pretty much that same Dracula story structure. So there's not really a lot new to be found there. I think though, really though, just when I look at the way that they told this story though, and the visuals and some of just the creative choices, I really think is just what makes this stand out from the pack of other movies that have had a similar story. Like we talked about that opening scene. There were several things I really liked about that. Just her calling out to him appearing and showing himself, and then the way that they depicted him, like you see her levitate off the ground and there's almost like this convulsing shaking thing that's happening, and it really did just look like there was just this force just overtaking her. And the visual of how he feeds on people in this, I like how there was nothing sensual or sexual or hot or whatever about it. Like it was just, it almost just seemed like an animal feeding on prey or a corpse or something like that. Just that sound of him absorbing the blood from them and how his entire body is contorting up and down as he's on top of somebody. It seemed very animalistic, like it seemed just very to the point, and this is just about consuming you. There is nothing pretty about it. There's nothing hot about it. It's not tilting the woman to the side and she's, and let's get a shot of her tits and she's getting her neck. Nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? No bullshit.
You
just
can't say
feeding
it's
animalistic on you.
You can't say it's nothing like that, though, based on the final scene when he is right between her breasts, drinking her blood.
Oh, yeah, that's a little different. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But you know what I mean, though? Like, what I'm saying is that typically when you have that scene, it seems like it's too picturesque. It's too sexualized. It's too like, it's almost like it's more like,
the True Blood version
it's
of
sexualized and it's too fantasy looking.
Yeah,
I like the animalistic take of it here.
Yeah, because you're essentially talking about all of True Blood, where it's either I'm murdering you by drinking your blood, or I'm fucking you by drinking your blood, and there was no in between.
Yeah. Like I just like how that was depicted, and that sound is just like it was just very just chilling, and I just like the ugliness of it because normally it's just not depicted that way. So I just thought that was just something that stood out to me to the scenes. And everything else, the story is playing out just like how we know it. Count Orlok summons you. He wants to buy some land. He wants to purchase this land, and he's not going to come here. You got to go to him. You got to do it. So all of that's the same or whatever. But typically that trip is not very interesting. We're just going to Transylvania. Then a chariot comes with what looks to be hooded horses, and there's a mysterious guy, and he's like, get in here. What was really cool about this one, though, was that visual shot of the chariot picking him up. I thought that was great looking. How one thing that was cool about it is that he's standing at this crossroads. So you can see like the cross of the roads, and he's right in the middle of it. So I like that, that whole kind of visual of, if he gets in here, this decision to get in here is going to fucking change everything for him, and you have those gypsies and those people that are seemingly aware of Dracula or trying to fend off Dracula and all that stuff. Were like, you need to go away from here. You need to get away from here. You do not need to go to Transylvania and go to Count Orlok's castle or whatever. So I love that visual of him. It was almost like he was in this dark tunnel. He was just shrouded in darkness. And there's that crossroad, and he's standing there in the middle of it. And this chariot, I like how there was no rider, there was no person controlling it. It just kind of, it's just horses this time. There was nobody controlling it. It just rides up to where he is, and then that door just opens by itself to that chariot, and for him to get in it. I just thought all of that was pretty damn cool.
But also, how is that not the biggest I'm noping the fuck out of here thing ever?
Exactly. Like, how do you get in after seeing all of that shit? But any story of this that you look at is kind of like that. Like in the Nosferatu, the original one, it was kind of, I'm actually impressed with what they did in 1922 because they've got hooded horses and black cloaks over all the horses. And there's a rider and he's got a black cloak over him. And he's like, come here, get in here, or whatever it is. And it was like,
to be
why
fair,
would you get in?
They could do whatever cool things they wanted with animals, like visually, because they also didn't care if they died.
Yeah,
so,
that too.
So that's probably how they got away with that. Those horses all like fell and broke their legs and were shot. But
Yeah,
like,
probably couldn't see out of the cloaks or anything like that.
but they're like, but we got really cool shots.
Yep, we got the cool shot though. But that was like one of the things, really, the first like 30 minutes of this film, I think is damn near perfect. Like the opening scene, the introduction to the characters. Okay, we got to go over here. The chariot picks him up. You see these gypsies and people doing this ritual thing to try to fend off. I'm thinking was another vampire.
Well,
it wasn't Dracula, but
so that goes back to a big thing in Romani culture and in culture and that whole thing. So that like they would legitimately think that if people died under mysterious circumstances, I'm not saying every case, but for the most part, it's like they died under mysterious circumstances. Were they infected by the vampire? So you went and staked them just in case.
Yeah.
And you staked them to the ground. That was one of the nice things, is that's actually very historically accurate. You took an iron stake to the ground because that was like a part of the whole like process with it. Is iron. Iron's very specifically, like, according to most lore, is very much a thing you use against supernatural things. Vampires, ghosts, spirits, all those things typically tend to be weak against iron. And that's also, weirdly enough, why a lot of church gates, or not church gates, I'm sorry, cemetery gates were made of iron, was to ward things away. Like spirits couldn't pass through it because it was iron, that type of stuff. But like that was a big part of the process. Is you would stake them through, and like I said, you did it just in case. It's also they're dead, so who cares? But like, there's weird things that would happen with the body because we all know that as you start decomposing, like liquid builds up in you and stuff like that. So they would come and stake you, and just like in this, where like things would come out of you because it's not like they were completely embalming and preserving the bodies like we do now. And so that would happen. And they'd be like, yeah, see, look, that was a vampire.
Yeah, look, that was a vampire.
They're like, yep, we did it. And no, we know now, yes, that's the natural process of things, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, to them, they're like, it's also like one of the reasons why like they would add bells. So one thing they used to do back in the day is they would put a bell next to your grave and they'd run a string down to your feet and they'd bury you like that. And the whole idea is sometimes, people weren't dead. And so they would move and the bell would ring. But also if they were undead, they'd move and the bell would ring, and stuff like that. But also, we know also, there's wind, there's this, there's that, whatever that can cause bells to ring. They'd be like, oh no, we got something, and you'd have to go kill it. And like, it's really kind of funny because like when you say it too, Jastin, like when this movie called them gypsies, that did like, it shocked me a little bit at first because I'm very much used to that being like a word you don't say anymore because of like all these things. And I'm like, but I get it because like, that's at least historically accurate to that time that's what they would have said. And like, so even then when you said it, like, it makes sense because that's like what they were called in the movie. So it's not even like anything like that. Like he specifically, they were gypsies in the movie. It was, but like, I really do think it's funny. Like, it just reminds me of that. Like, it's like when shows right after COVID, I was so weirded out when I wouldn't see characters in masks, or like, you know what I mean? Because I'm so used to my everyday life, I'm wearing a mask, and then you're like, man, these people's on the TV shows, they're not wearing masks. And then I'm like, oh wait, this show was made in 2011. Of course they're not. Like, it's just that weird dichotomy you have with some of that stuff. Like when you hear things like that, when it's like accurate to what it is, it just still, it's so funny how things have changed to where like the accuracy make you go, whoa. You're like, oh wait, never mind. Like, this movie is set in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Yes, that's exactly what would have been said at that time. This movie is not being, shitty. Like, but yeah, that's just something I thought of whenever you were talking about that. But like, because that's what it was. Like, that's a very big Romani tradition, or not necessarily Romani, but like an Eastern European tradition when it came to people that were dead. Is the staking.
Okay. Interesting. So maybe they pulled that directly from some of that historical stuff. So, but either way, it was just, I think all those developments were cool. Like all the whole first 30, 40 minutes of this movie, I just thought it was really cooking on all cylinders. And like the final part of that 30 or so minutes is he arrives to Transylvania and he meets Orlok for the first time. And man, this meeting with Orlok, Dracula, whatever you want to call him, that has to be the best first encounter like I've seen with like this character, because man, what a presence he had. He was just so like the way that they projected his voice, how he sounded, everything that he was saying to him about, you were late and all of my attendants have left. And he just sounded so creepy in those scenes. I love the fact that you couldn't quite see him. That was like the thing that I loved about that the most. They kept him in the shadows. You couldn't quite see him. They just showed these clips and these pictures of him talking or looming over. I keep forgetting what his name was in this.
That's Jonathan Harkin. Just say it.
Yeah, Harkin. Yeah, basically same. Yeah, but just the shots of him looming over him, the shots of sometimes his shadow would be over here, the guy would look over here, but then suddenly he'd be over here, just sort of looming around him. And then I just loved that entire thing. And like at first, I think that Nicholas Hoult played it really well, because at first you could tell he was intimidated, but he's trying to keep his composure. And he's trying to talk to him. And whenever he would say something wrong, like when he just tried to question him about something, don't address me this way, and all that kind of stuff. Like he would just go real aggressive to him. And it was cool because he wouldn't, like, his body, his mannerisms wouldn't be showing a lot of aggression, but all he had to do was raise his voice and look at him. And that was enough to, like, you could see Nicholas Hoult like cowering, but not to the effect of like, I'm fully terrified, because we weren't there yet. And then by the end, when he starts kind of walking towards him, the look of terror that Nicholas Hoult gave, that was a good, I'm fucking horrified face. I mean, he did a great face there.
With that whole introduction of the meeting between Jonathan Harkin and Dracula. I'm sorry, Heather, did you say you've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Gary Oldman one?
A long time ago, but yes.
Yeah. But like, don't you feel watching this though, that's what Francis Ford Coppola wished he could have done?
Yeah.
Was this one?
Yeah.
Because, well, that's a fine one. I like the ones where it shows his shadow moving differently than him and all that other stuff. It's good. But like, I kind of agree with you, Jastin. Like, this meeting was damn near perfect. Like the way they would do the shots, like just walking up the stairs and he's just instantly in the room and he's just like, oh shit. And then like,
yeah,
the whole thing of like the shadows here, but then he's like, but then Dracula's leaning over his shoulder and it's this and that, like those elements, like where it's like, it's telling you this is a supernatural being. But like the Jonathan Harker character is, it's that concept is like new and foreign. So it's like, he's like, it's that whole, like he's constantly doing that. Wait, is that what he was here? But like, he's here. Like it's that whole, like, what am I seeing?
Yeah.
And almost just being on your back foot the whole time. Like, and it, like you said, Jastin, like he's unsettled. Like he's just almost like playing catch up to what the situation is that whole time. And he's trying to stay with it, you know, but like Dracula's just keeping him like on his heels the whole time. Cause he's just like, anytime he does any little thing and messes up and it's like, no, I'm Lord. Like, I'm not Mr. I'm a Lord. And he's like, no, I'm a Lord, motherfucker. Like,
yep.
You know what I mean? Like he's just keeping him on his heels. And then he's like, oh, okay, I need to sign this. And he's like, you see Dracula's over here, but then Dracula's right over his shoulder. Like, yeah, you need to sign your wife to me. Like you think
that this controlling everything.
You think that this is about an estate. No, you're signing your wife and I'm going to give you some gold, but I'm also going to fuck your head and you're going to sign for it because like I said, this Dracula is all about consent. So he's like, no, you're going to sign this document saying I can have your wife and I'm going to fuck your brain.
Yep.
And you're not even going to know it, but you're also not going to think about it because I'm in your head already. And you just don't even know it yet.
Yeah, just all of that was great, man. And like you said, the whole document signing, whenever he cut his finger, which does happen in the 1922, but in the 1922, you know, he was like, watch yourself. And then he says, let me see, did you hurt yourself? And he licks his finger. And then the guy, you know, John is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that's a bit too much. Like, I like in this one,
I think they do that in Bram Stoker's Dracula too. I could have sworn like.
Oh, yeah, because he cuts himself shaving and he takes the blade that he was shaving with and licks it. Yeah, Gary Oldman licks it behind his back and he's like, fuck yeah, I got some blood. But I kind of like how in this one he was like, watch yourself, you know, like he was like, watch what you do. Or he said, watch how you tend to yourself. He said something like that, but they just had a shot of his eyes just bulging like, man, I want to eat this motherfucker right now. But I got to get him to sign this contract. You know what I'm saying?
Which, like I said, he's all about consent and I appreciate it. Like,
yeah.
But like, I was really like, I was so glad that once again, like we've said multiple times, Robert Edgar really does know how to turn things because I really thought he was going to like lick his finger. I was just really expecting that during that. So the way he's looking like, well, I'm going to lick this man's finger. And I thought he was going to do it. And I thought they were going to do something where like the Harking character's just going to be like, oh yeah, suck my finger and like enjoy it. But then like not, cause like I said, they've taught you that there's going to be that sexual element to it. And I like how there wasn't. Like, I really did appreciate that he was just staring. Like you said, like he was like, I want to eat this motherfucker, but I can't yet because I haven't gotten what I wanted.
Yep. I got to get what I want first. And then like his locket with the picture of her in it. He was like, man, let me see that locket. I'm keeping it, bitch. You know, this guy, he was a motherfucker.
Like, and it had her hair in it and he's all, lilacs. And he's like, hey, you've got my locket. And he's like, no, I don't. Just walks the fuck away.
You ain't getting it back, motherfucker. So, like, I just really loved all of that. That whole first part was just fucking great. And then, whenever, and I forget when exactly this happened, but that scene where it's doing the montage and he's narrating, not really narrating, but it's more like I guess it would just be a voiceover while stuff is happening on the screen and he's speaking Romanian. I loved every single one of those scenes where he's just speaking and it sounds so dark and ominous and all this shit is happening. Or when he was on the, and it was like, winds carry me faster to where she's going to be and all that stuff. And like, all of those scenes were fucking great, man. I love how he sounded. I love how they projected his voice. I loved like just what they were depicting during those scenes and how he is controlling things and slowly just taking over and controlling this situation. I just thought all that shit was great. And just to talk about Lily Rose and just some of the stuff that she was doing, I like a lot of the stuff that you said, Heather. Like, I think definitely there was a lot there with having this connection with him. And I loved how she depicted the confusing nature of her feelings. Like, do I like this or there's a part of me that might like this, but it feels wrong. Or like that question that she asked Ellen when she said, is darkness within us, or is it something that comes from outside? You know, is darkness within, or is it something that comes from outside? I'm abridging what she said, but I love the way that she said that. And I like the kind of confusing nature of it all, because a lot of times when you talk to people who have been groomed, or there has been a predator who has infused some sort of trauma on them, that is I'm not saying this is the same, or I'm not even so much saying maybe he was going for that, like it was intentional. I would hate to say, oh yes, the Eggers was using victims who have really been victimized of this to depict this in this movie. I don't want to make that claim, but I did see some parallels with that confusing nature. Like, you know, the things we're doing and the things this person says to me and the things they're manipulating me with give the confusing feelings of, okay, this person is saying that they care for me and stuff like that, but yet that other part of you that knows what is happening is wrong, that knows what is happening maybe shouldn't be happening. And the confusing nature of, do I like this? Is this is this something that I like, or is a part of me, or is this something that I need to repel? Is this some evil that I need to repel? So I liked how she depicted the conflicting nature of that.
Well, I mean, we're like, because that is something that is kind of real with some people that were groomed. Like, when they do come to the realization of maybe it's not real feelings. Like, maybe it's not that I really do truly just love this person. Was I taught to love this person? Was I conditioned to love this person? And sometimes it's that conflict is kind of similar to that. It's like, where does what I think I feel begin and maybe the grooming end or whatever? Like those types of things, like you know, that separation of stuff. It's the same thing with like Stockholm syndrome or something like that, where somebody's just kidnapped and falls in love with their captor. It's the same type of mentality. It's just what is real and what's not in those scenarios. It's also the same with people coming out of cults.
True.
You know,
very true.
It's a very similar mindset in a lot of those things, because a lot of victims of those things are manipulated in the same ways. You know, groomers and cult leaders use a lot of the same tactics to get people to submit to them. And in a lot of ways, that's what it was with him. You know, it was something that she felt like she needed when she was younger, you know, because she needed some sort of connection. So, like, you know, we talked about, she calls out, you know, into the ether, like what, you know, and, you know, when he responds, she's like, you know, it was like everything, because it's like what she was searching for, and it finally came to her.
She's vulnerable. Yeah,
exactly. And then she realizes over time that it was wrong, and it's not actually what she needed. She might have thought so because That's what she wanted something. And in those times when you want something, sometimes you fall prey to whatever you get. You'll rationalize what you get as that's what you wanted, when that might not be the case. And so, you get those conflictions of something until you do sometimes find something that's actually real. Like, her finding her husband, where she had real feelings for him, and it showed her, what was wrong about the other things. But then even then, you're so conditioned, sometimes it still becomes a struggle.
Yeah. Like when she talked about that one dream that she had, and that's one complaint I had. That one dream she described, I wish we could have seen that. When she was talking about the wedding and I'm holding hands with death, and then we embrace and I'm so happy. But when I turned around and everybody is dead that was at the wedding, and we are just like embracing and loving each other in a sea of death and hopelessness. God, I wanted to see that. God, I wanted Eggers to depict that.
Exactly. Who the fuck is going to do that better? And he doesn't give it to us? That's kind of a sham.
Yeah, like
hopefully there's an extended cut somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully, please, because man, I wanted that scene. I was like, Eggers, why did you not do that?
Can we get?
Why did you not do that? Why was that exposited instead of seen? But it was exactly what you said, Sterling. It again speaks to that conflicting nature. Her even dreaming, sometimes when she dreams about him, she's like she said, but I felt so happy in that moment. Everything around me was death, and I felt so happy. And again, speaking to that conflicting nature of it all, even in some of her dreams, she's like, why the fuck in the dream was I so happy to be around all this death? So even that shit is on point. And to speak to what you were saying about the grooming and manipulating, when he got there, he was doing the same shit. Like there was no cap to this motherfucker as far as how he was grooming and manipulating and shit. Like, cause even when he got in front of her, he was saying a lot of that same shit. He was like, well, you're different from everybody else. You like this because it's in your nature. You like this because this is who you really are. Still doing that shit.
Well, and then on top of that, giving her a time frame and being like, hey, you got 3 days and I'm going to be killing somebody every day until you give in to me.
Yeah, that was some horrible shit too. Like just giving her that 3 days. But those were the scenes that I loved. Those scenes with those two and him doing the manipulation. And like y'all said, like Skarsgård, he was just unrecognizable, man. And even in that scene, how he'd be in the shadow, but as he's talking to her and as his influence on her is getting more intense, he's stepping closer and closer. The camera's getting closer and closer to him as you're seeing his presence take over and intimidating her more. And yeah, man, when he said, you got 3 days, all this shit's going to happen to you. And he's just sort of kind of fades away in that moment, man. He was just such a bastard in this, but I just loved how they depicted him, man. Those scenes were so effective. And I just feel like those are scenes that I just won't soon forget. Just hella memorable shit. And that's why, like, the times he was on screen doing some shit, just the other scenes just pale in comparison. Yeah, they're okay. They're entertaining. The actors are acting and doing shit. But God, those scenes were so effective, man.
And I think, though, that partially that's why I guess constantly was thinking that we were going to end up getting sexy Dracula stuff in this, is because you also did cast Bill Skarsgård, who is a physically attractive man. And so because of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the movie, you know, when you get old man Gary Oldman at the beginning with the weird fucking hair and all that shit, but he drinks some blood and drinks some blood and drinks some blood. And he's like, hey, I'm Gary Oldman. I'm posh. Look at me walk around London. Like, that's kind of why I felt like I thought we were going to get that. I thought because he was so grotesque at the beginning and stuff like that, that I was like, oh, okay, he's going to drink a lot of blood. And by the time he gets to London, he's going to be walking around, shirtless around fucking London, and everybody's going to want to fuck him the whole fucking movie. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's one reason why I was like constantly expecting that, because I thought we were just going to get sexy Bill Skarsgård walking around and her being like, oh, but I want to fuck him. Like the whole movie. Like up until like a certain point when I realized like, oh, they're not going to do that. But like, I'm not going to lie. I probably kept thinking they were for a little too long. Just because, like I said, Hollywood has convinced us that's what you do with vampires. You know what I mean? Like, I just assumed that's where this is going. And to, be fair to Robert Eggers, kudos to you for not giving in to that.
Because every victim felt like just really a victim. He didn't waste any time doing none of that bullshit, none of the sweet talk, none of the enticing, none of the, oh, I'm going to have her come out in some sexy gown and she's going to come meet me as a wolf and we're going to fuck as I'm a wolf. Nothing like that, like in Bram Stoker's, or nothing. No fun stuff. It was just, if you were really a fucking piece of fucking meat.
If you really think of Bram Stoker's Dracula the movie, it's not surprising that Francis Ford Coppola has done sex predator stuff. If you really look at that movie, it kind of like correlates and you're like, oh yeah, that probably was what he did. Like, he was telling us so long ago that was just what he wanted to do. Like, but it's one of those things.
It was too sexy, man. It's just too sexy.
It really was. And
like, you had Winona Ryder and that one chick, the redhead. I mean, she was cute.
Lucy.
I mean, Gary Oldman was doing like suave shit.
Monica Bellucci.
It was too sexy.
You had Monica Bellucci as one of the naked vampire brides. That was feeling all over Keanu Reeves. How is that not hot? You have 3 naked women, one of them Monica fucking Bellucci, rubbing all over Keanu Reeves. That's a sexy scene.
Yeah, and his face straight as fuck. Come on, Keanu. That's Monica Bellucci. You could twist your face a little bit. That shit was straight as fuck.
Hey. He was trying not to get vampire, motherfucker. You gotta give him some credit. That's what saved his damn life. The motherfucker would be dead if he gave in to that temptation.
See, I don't know. I'm sitting there. Maybe I'm being overly critical, but I was like, come on, man. You could just be a bit hornier for it. I mean, just a bit.
But that's what saved that man's life.
Just act like you saw a breast.
Jastin,
just act like you saw him.
You're just saying you would have died.
Just act like you kind of saw him.
I'm just saying, Jastin, you would have died.
I know you saw him, Keanu. I know you saw them.
His love for Winona Ryder kept him alive.
That's true. That's true. But anyway, but you see what I'm saying? But like in this, bro, he didn't waste any time with any of that shit. Everybody just seemed like a means to an end. Even when he was killing those people, when he went and killed the kids and then killed Ellen too, it was just some real quick. He didn't say nothing. There was no fancy dialogue. It wasn't like, I am the Dark Prince of Doom. It was none of that bullshit, man. He just did it because he was doing what he said he was going to do. And then he would do what he did and be like, night number 2. Night number 2 is done. He would just say that to her,
Dude was on a mission the whole movie, for sure.
Yeah. Like, he was not playing any games.
I mean, and to be fair, like I said, like, maybe, and hopefully that'd be kind of nice if maybe this movie resets vampires for us a little bit. Like, I get that there is supposed to be a carnal nature to vampires, because the whole nature in which they feed is fairly intimate. You know, it's not like, oh, let me just go rip your leg off like you're a fucking werewolf. No, you have to like get up on them and be like, and stuff like that. So there is an inherently carnal nature to it, which I think is what has seeped into our culture as what became sexy. And it's the idea of seducing somebody so you can feed on them multiple times and stuff like that. But like maybe, just maybe, if you make them fucking monsters, they just feed on people anyway multiple times. Who gives a fuck? Like what he did to fucking Jonathan Harkin, what he did to Nicholas Hoult, and fed on that motherfucker multiple times. Why? Because he just was a fucking monster.
Yeah.
And he was so psychologically wrecked, he didn't know what was real or not.
Yeah.
Like, that's another possibility. And maybe, just maybe, that will maybe seep into culture, that we can just have actual fucking monsters again. Like, and it's really funny because, like, historically speaking, when it comes into like the narrative of monsters and stuff like that, there's only actually a handful of them that aren't monsters. Like Frankenstein's monster is not actually a monster, because the whole point of that story is that while they call him Frankenstein's monster and Dr. Frankenstein, was the one that made him, in the end, Frankenstein, the doctor, was the monster. He created this life and then went, ew, I don't want you, and abandoned him. And, and all these things didn't teach him nothing, just fucking abandoned his creation. And so that's why he was always viewed as a monster. But at the end of the story, it really is. Frankenstein's the monster, and the monster is just a being that's just trying to find its place in the world. Which is ultimately super fucking relatable to people, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But Dracula was meant to be a monster. He was a predator, and maybe, just maybe, we can get back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that there's the appeal of living forever and all this other stuff. And I mean, if you look at any media over the last, 30 years, every vampire has 27 abs and all this other stuff. I mean, look at other Skarsgård. Sexy fucking vampire, Like, maybe we can get some just monster vampires again. And, I just like the idea of no redemption needed. Yeah. They're like, nah, I just drink blood, dude. I'm a monster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just have this kick where there are some people, if they could connect with me, or they have just some sort of innate relationship with the supernatural, that's even more enticing. It's just a more enticing meal. It's like getting a steak dinner versus eating a hamburger, which was one of those kids, but she was like a steak dinner. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all it really was.
Yeah. It's just the idea of her, like, giving herself.
Yeah.
And, in the whole idea of calling out to him and all those things, like, it just made him crave her.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. It wasn't any kind of love or connection or anything like that. It was just a craving, and it was just a hunger, and her perfectly being able to satisfy that hunger, because this is something he had tenderized. This is horrible, I guess, to say in a way, but this was like that meat he had tenderized and let,
it's like,
thaw and
steak?
sit and took care of, and added all the seasonings to it and all of that kind of stuff. And now it's time to eat this shit.
Well, I'll make it slightly worse, Jastin. I mean, essentially, he dry aged it.
Yep.
He marinated it.
Yep.
He put all the prep work in. And it's like, if you marinated a steak and you've got it in the fridge overnight and you're coming the next day and you're like, yeah, do you want to eat the marinated steak, or do you want the other steak that's just still sitting in the package? Like,
exactly.
And that's the unfortunate thing, but that's also kind of what I like about it, just for the sheer fact that that's a weirdly relatable thing that people would understand, but also shows like that he's a fucking monster.
Yeah. Because this is a human being.
Yeah, and it's that. And it's like, because that's what the control was for him. Like, the control he had over her that was the seasonings. That was all this and that. Like, that was that for him. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you know, it's one of those things. It's like you said, if you're perfectly prepped this piece of meat, or do you want the steak you could just go get out of the fridge and toss in the pan? You know, sure, if you're hungry, you just toss the meat in the pan and you eat. Or do you want the one that you're like, man, this got the perfect amount of salt and pepper and garlic, and it's, you know what I mean? Like, I brought it out and it's sitting at room temp now, so that way the center will cook properly, and like all these things. Like, that's what the control was to him.
Yeah.
You know, like, it had nothing to do with anything other than he had that control.
And it was almost like he saw the sun coming out, but the time that he spent, he just had to gorge on that. The time that he had spent grooming that, cultivating that, tenderizing that, all the other metaphors and shit and literal things that we're talking about that he did. It was almost like maybe he could have got up, but he wasn't, because that motherfucker is just an insatiable, just monstrous son of a bitch.
Well, and then on top of that too, I don't know.
So he died for it.
I can just weirdly relate to that too, because like, there have been times I've gone to the store and I get me like a nice 12-ounce ribeye. I pick me up some asparagus and some mashed potatoes, and so I get some like nice like dinner rolls and stuff like that. And I make myself this really nice steak dinner. And I get like 3/4 in, and I've eaten a stupid amount of mashed potatoes and a stupid amount of asparagus.
You're already full.
And I've eaten too many rolls, but I haven't finished that steak yet. Or even sometimes when I finish the steak, but there's like all the juice sitting there, and I'm like, but I got to have a roll and I got to soak up that juice. And I'm painfully full. But I'm not going to let all the steak juice go to waste, and I'm going to soak it all up in a fucking roll, and I'm still going to eat it.
Yep.
Because
and you still gonna eat, and you know what's gonna happen. You know it's gonna be sick. You know your ass is gonna be fucked up, but you keep going.
And it's weirdly relatable, but it's because of all the effort I put into making it taste exactly how I want it to be. I crafted the perfect meal, and I'm going to eat every fucking ounce of that meal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I weirdly
that's why I feel he didn't get up. Maybe he could have, but he didn't for those exact reasons. That's why he didn't get up, you know?
Yeah, and it's that weird thing too, because like, you know, it's that aspect of control, but it's like, there is part of that game of them wanting to like get away from the control, but they can't help it and they come back. There's that element of it that was feeding him too. Like the fact that she wanted to get away, but she couldn't completely, that plays into it, because like, that's the difference between her and the Renfield character. Because the Renfield just gave in completely. Wasn't even going to try to get away. It was just completely, hey, I'm your slave.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, but there's no game.
Exactly.
You know, he wants that. He wants part of the challenge. You know, he wants part of that, even though when the ultimate goal is control even, but you want to control even the game too. And when it's just given openly and freely quickly, you're just like, okay. Like you don't even feel like you got to control that much, because it's just given over immediately. And you don't get to play with it. You don't get to do these things to manipulate and be like, oh no, I'm losing control, let me get it back. Even though that's part of your control. You know, it's intentional with it. And I like that this kind of more clearly shows the difference behind what he wants, because he wants the part of, like I said, the game to it too. And not just the overwhelming adoration of just, oh, I'm your slave. And he's just like, okay, cool. I mean, I'll use you, but you're not in game for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that helps to understand why maybe he didn't get up. Maybe if that was just him feeding on somebody, he would have just got up. Oh, the sun's coming out. Let me get it. Let me get the fuck out of here and get to bed. but this was different. And because it was different, that's why it had to be her. That's why she was the only one who could probably get this done. So those are some of the aspects that I think, even though, yes, in all of these, there is this woman is bait and it winds up being his doom. I really like what that said about him, what that said about her, what they said about this relationship that they had, and the way he melted in the sun. It wasn't a fade away. He didn't evaporate into ash or, I've seen a lot of Sunlight Dracula deaths. I like the melting here and the blood of him coming out and stuff, but I like how he didn't completely go away. I like how there was some bone and some body still there, and they were just sort of laying over her corpse or whatever. I really like that final shot.
Well, it was nice because it's essentially the sunlight made him get rid of everything that he had eaten that kept him alive. And so he purged all the blood he drank, and it's like he just has nothing left. Like he purged his life, but he's still physically there.
Yeah.
Because I was actually wondering that. I was like, are they going to go the original Nosferatu route? And he's going to be drinking her blood, and then you just go.
Not there. But I did like that there was something. And I mean, Edgar's just as a way of just depicting something visually. So that final overhead shot of that shit. And then William Dafoe was kind of funny in that scene. He walks up to the window and you see his reflection and he's all looking triumphant out the window. I'm glad we didn't end on that shot. Thankfully, that wasn't the final shot. I'm glad the final shot was the overhead.
There was just that hint of overacting at all times with him, but it was never too much. It was just that perfect amount at all times.
I mean, I almost expected a fist pump, man. It was just a fist pump away from being too much.
What if it ended with him staring out the window and he just went, and then it ended.
Mission complete. I just almost expected him to go. I mean, the sun was shining so bright. He had the biggest smile on his face. I just almost wanted him to go, yeah, man, I did this shit. Yeah, man, I was right. Everybody that said I was crazy, they were wrong. I did this shit.
It just turns
that's
back
what
to
it
him.
was like.
He's all,
I think that's what that was.
Fuck you. Woo.
Yeah.
He just walks up to Nicholas Hoult, who's crying, and just chest bumps him. He's like, woo, did it.
Yeah. I should have betted somebody money.
Read the room,
I'd
dude.
be so rich right now. But yeah, it's just, I'm glad that was the penultimate scene, and the final scene was what we got.
Well, and something that I just thought of when you were talking about that, though, is weirdly enough, her death was her dream.
It was. Nice.
Because while she's not happy that she's giving herself over to him, she is happy that she's ending it.
Yeah.
She had to
That's true.
Embrace death to end it.
You're right. It was foreshadowing. Nice. Good call, sir. Good call.
I mean, I don't know. I'm going to make an executive decision. We'll up this a point. We'll give it an 80. We'll just give it an 80.
Okay.
Because of that.
No, that was a good call. And she was like, yeah, because she was like, I was embracing death, but it was the happiest I had ever been. And yeah, that's beautiful, man. Because that's what happened at the end. She was embracing death, but she was happy because she knew she saved everybody. That's badass.
That it was the willing sacrifice to end it. And in turn, she was saving her husband's life. She was ending the plague. She was ending her own suffering,
Yeah.
just by doing that. So maybe that's why Eggers didn't show the dream. Because the ending is the dream.
Okay.
We take it back, Eggers. We take it back,
Eggers. We take it back.
As long as you say I'm right. If you don't say I'm right, then you need to show us the dream. If you're coming out and just being like, nah, she died. Okay, then you need to show us the dream. If you also just want to retroactively say, nope, you're right. That was the dream. And then just go, fuck, I'm so glad somebody else said that. That's fine too. You can take credit. I don't care. Because I still look good because I called it. So I'm fine either way.
Yep. And I think that's it for me, man. Y'all already talked about the other scenes. I no need to go into the scenes that just were not as interesting or just, they really were just kind of development in between kind of scenes. But yeah, if maybe there was a way to shorten those a little bit or something, get this to about 150, 145, it almost would have been damn near perfect. But, you know.
It really is just the scenes of those people talking that I just don't care about.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. Like them, like those little children being like, Papa, there's a monster under the bed. Just, they did all that to set up them going, Papa, the monster, no. And, you know, him being under Nosferatu curse and he can't wake up. Like, I get it. But also, like, I felt like they spent so much time setting that up. There's like fucking 8 scenes of them going, Papa, the monsters.
Well, yeah. And the thing is that Ellen was more important than that. Just like what Heather was talking about. There were some good scenes with Ellen and, with her,
Anna?
You know what I'm saying? Or I'm sorry, Anna and Ellen. There were good
Lucy.
scenes with Anna.
Killing me.
Where the fuck did Helen come from? But there were good scenes with Anna and Ellen. So it also was weird that when Ellen, or I'm sorry, Anna was killed, we really didn't get to see that or that be as dramatic. I mean, we saw her get the plague, you know, we saw the rats and everything, but that was also interesting after all that development, after all those talks. They had a really nice scene where they were in the bed together and she was like, can I sleep with you? She was, you know, Ellen was scared and they share a moment and she was like, you know, God's going to protect us. And she was like, thanks for loving me, Anna. You know, that I thought that was sweet.
Man.
But the way she died,
so
we didn't even
ruined
get
for
to
me.
see it.
That scene was so ruined for me. Because like I said, Hollywood has taught me to constantly expect sexy things in vampire movies. I was like, are they going to fuck?
You wanted, yep, or are they going to lesbian kiss or something like that?
And it's not I'm not saying I wanted it. I'm just saying that's what I expected because that's what vampire movies do. I'm like, hey, there's been no sexiness yet. So
in
are they
Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mina and what's her name kiss? Lucy. Yep, they're frolicking around in the rain and wet for some reason. Coppola, what the fuck were you doing,
I'm
man?
telling you.
And
like,
then they just
you
kiss
think
each
about
other.
it. He's telling
they
you
just
he's
kiss each other.
He's a sex pest, and he's telling you in the fucking 90s.
Come on, Coppola.
That's what I'm saying. It's
They
like,
were just frolicking. I'm thinking about it now. Like they were just frolicking around in the rain. You know,
dude, Francis Ford Coppola made me probably like just constantly expect the worst in this movie because of all the bullshit he does. Man, Dracula's all walking out of a saloon with shades and a top hat going, oh, I'm Dracula, bitch. How do you watch that movie? And like I said, you get the same fucking story and I get no sexy Dracula. Like, that's why I was expecting it because it's been that for decades. And outside of what everybody talks about with Keanu Reeves, that's been the quintessential, hey, this is how you do a Dracula. That's been the standard. So I was always expecting the shoe to drop, the sexy shoe to drop in this movie. Anyway, you guys got anything else about Nosferatu?
Not for me.
No, Nosferatu.
It almost makes it sound like you were saying that about this movie. Like you hated
know.
it. You're like,
No,
this is a big Nosferatu
0 out
for
of
me.
10, no notes.
I guarantee there's some motherfucker out there that would, you know what about, I think about the new Nosferatu, it's a big Nosferatu for me.
Yep.
Dick.
Or maybe the NAW Nosferatu. Yep, somebody's good.
Nosferatu. On that note, thank you guys for listening to this episode of the CineScores podcast. Check us out on the internet at www.cinemaslayers.com. We are CineSlayers podcast on Facebook. We're at CineSlayers or cinema_slayers on Threads, Instagram, and the Letterboxd. We are cinemaslayers.bsky.social on Blue Sky. We are at CineSlayers Pod on TikTok and YouTube. Shout out to Plug Migo and Mundo Cho for our theme song and logos, respectively. Give us a 5-star rating review. We'd really appreciate it. Really help us out. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your friends' family, tell your family's friends, and most of all, tell those dear sweet mothers, because dear sweet mothers love
Bill Skarsgård.
Not in this movie, though.
I mean, but his performance was great, though.
Yeah, but in this movie, most likely mothers are going to like Nicholas Hoult.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Nicholas Hoult, then.
Nobody's fantasizing about Bill Skarsgård right now. Nobody's going, that's my baby Skarsgård. Although I did see a TikTok where they were like doing that whole thing of where they're like, oh, it's, you know, it's only happened. If I had a nickel for every time I was attracted to a Skarsgård as a vampire, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. And then I saw this movie. I was like, who the fuck were you attracted to in this movie? What do you mean you were attracted to Bill Skarsgård as a vampire? You should have 1 nickel, motherfucker. You should not be having 2. I don't say this lightly. Get therapy. Because you should only be attracted to the other Skarsgård that weirdly played a guy named Bill. That's very weird. Other Skarsgård as a vampire was Bill, but this was Bill Skarsgård in this movie. Holy fuck, they are a weird family. And also, I'm not convinced that they weren't genetically made in a lab. Because they are just weird, perfect Viking children. I mean, the older brother's on the fucking show Vikings. It's a little too on the nose. Anyway. We here at the CineScores podcast are pro slut, pro Sydney, and pro naked. You. Yes. You, Cinefans. You are enough. Justice for Chris. Justice for Todd. Justice for all those wonderful, wonderful stunt people and those amazing animators out there. They don't get enough love. And that's why they need justice. Yeah. I guess we're at the point where, you know, as I always in this podcast, the YouTube videos and the TikToks, just remember, according to Jastin, Moon Knight is the Best Picture winner. I really hope I'm right about the end of this movie. I just feel like I have to.
I think you are.
I think you are, dude.
He's very specific and he's very thoughtful in what he does. I think you're right.
No, I think you're right.
Because like I said, if I'm not, motherfucker, put that dream sequence in.
Yes.
And PETA, get off the fucking rats. Like, why isn't PETA saying nothing about him eating a fucking pigeon? He ate a pigeon.
That's true.
Right when you said PETA, I thought for sure that was going to be the scene you were talking about. And then you went to the rats and I went, oh shit, I thought he was about to talk about that bird that got ate.
And I think it's because they don't actually care about any of this stuff they're talking about. I think it's just because in the trailer it shows a bunch of rats and they're like, oh, no, the rats in the plague. No. They didn't actually watch the movie.
How did they do it again?
They're like, rats in the plague, and you know. That's how I just think of everybody at PETA talking. And it's not because I don't have an issue with what they technically say they are, you know, people against the or people for the ethical treatment of animals. Sure, that's a good thing. But you know what is one of the crazy things about them, and this is why I hate them as an organization, and they're fucking terrible. They have been known to abuse animals in their own ads just to make it seem like other people are abusing them. Like, more or less to be like, oh, look at this dog catcher, kill this dog. Isn't he terrible? And it's a guy they fucking hired to fucking abuse the dog to do that.
That's crazy.
Also,
Yeah, don't do that.
don't do that. If you ever have to relinquish an animal, for the love of God, never take it to a PETA shelter. Ever. Because you know what they do? They fucking kill them. No PETA shelters are non-euthanasia shelters. They are all, we'll just murder them instead of actually taking care of them. So do not, if you ever have to relinquish an animal, just do not. Or even if you're just saving what you think is a stray, never, just never, for the love of God, take it to a PETA shelter. They will just kill it. PETA is a horrible organization. Yeah.
Damn.
Fucking terrible.
Damn.
And like I said, if it really was just about the ethical treatment of animals, 100% for that. We don't need to be beating and abusing animals and all these other things. But yeah, they are just horrible, horrible people. And they do it. Why? Because it just gets people talking about them. You know, they had that big thing against, what was it, Mario in the 90s because of the Tanuki suit. And a Tanuki is a real animal. It's a raccoon dog. It's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like, oh, people are killing these like Tanukis because of all this other stuff. So they like did an ad that was like Mario that was skinned and bloody. And they were like, how would you like it if Mario did this to you or something like that? And I'm like, I get it that there were people that were weirdly going and killing Tanukis because of, you know, because they were inspired by Mario. Hey, just call them out for being shitty and fucking terrible. Don't traumatize children for no fucking reason other than to get you what you think is your righteous message across. Just say those people are fucking terrible and the practice of what they're doing is terrible. Because that's fine. That's okay. We can all get behind that. People shouldn't just be going and killing Tanukis because of a game. We can all agree that's fucking terrible. Don't do this other shit just because you want to be all shock value about it. Get the fuck out of here. Traumatizing fucking children with your bloody fucking thing. Like, because like, and I get it. It's a traumatizing thing that these people were doing, but like, you can approach it better. Don't be a fucking monster to say other people are monsters.
Yeah.
I really hate them.
That's what you call, even though, yes, your cause may be just in a lot of ways, that doesn't mean that the way you go about it can be just ugly or stupid or be a dick about it. You know, just because you may have a good cause, it doesn't mean that you just have carte blanche to do whatever. You know what I mean? Sometimes I think people think that, oh, my cause is just so I can just do it any way I want. And then if people miss the point, then what have you done? How effective is what you're doing?
No, exactly. And like, they just don't seem to get that. Anyway, too much about them. I just wanted to point that out, that they were all up in arms about the rats. Give no fucks about pigeons, though. And also to talk about our group text on the podcast, I completely forgot Nicole Kidman was in The Northman.
How did you do that?
I honestly did too, until I was like, who else was in that movie? And I was like, oh yeah.
Jastin, I think, you know.
Yeah, she was the motherly mother.
The one that wanted to fuck her son. I know, very fun.
You forgot
Jastin, I think you underestimate how little I think about Nicole Kidman.
Little, you just mean like only 80% of the time?
No, I mean pretty much I only think about her if she's literally in what I'm watching or when I'm about to watch something in the theater, because she's in every, you know, she's in an ad before every movie I watch. Outside of that, I think
what
we're
about
not.
just like daily life, like every day?
Honestly, I think it reaches around 0% for the most part. Because I don't
0%.
watch a lot of Nicole Kidman movies and I don't go to the theater every day.
That's
Me
reserved for you,
too?
Jastin. You're fine.
So, I mean, honestly, when it comes up on this podcast or outside of that, maybe once or twice a week, depending on how many Nicole Kidman movies I watch in a week, which is very little. So,
Wow.
Take it as you will.
yeah,
I'm just very surprised by that.
you shouldn't be.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
shouldn't be.
I'm just saying, I don't think I've ever said or done anything to give you the thought that I would think about it any more than that.
If you were to ask him about other Skarsgård, that might be a different answer.
At least every other day. I mean, to be fair, if I ever think about abs, I think about the Skarsgårds.
That's fair.
I mean, I just figured there'd be at least a few days every day that you might think about Nicole.
A few days every day? No. Nothing.
No.
Very little.
Maybe a day where you dreamed that you thought about her every day.
The only time I've ever dreamt about her was one time I remember I dreamt that I saw her less before movies I watched. I was like, I dreamt I was in a movie theater and her ad didn't play. And I was like, this is nice.
So it was like the best dream you had?
Yeah. I was like,
You weren't like, oh, I miss her. This is
Jastin,
walking out of the theater.
I hate to break it to you. More often than not, when I do think about her, which is like once a week when I'm at the theaters, it is bad. I do hate her.
Bad, like, oh, that's bad, but you mean good?
No, as in, I hate this woman and this ad needs to go away. I would
Hate,
probably.
like, I
Been
hate
tainted.
her, but like in an endearing way. Like,
No.
I hate her, but I love her.
As in, if I saw her in this ad less, I might be tempted to watch one of her movies once a year. But the fact
Wow.
that I see her every week, I dread just seeing her stupid high heels walking on a wet street
It's just a
because
fashion
that is the beginning of that ad.
I'm surprised Jastin hasn't just like done the AMC rewards program just because he knows he would see her every time.
Well, that's because there's no AMC near him.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, he just doesn't have a chance to see her every day. Because I legitimately think, regardless of anything, AMC would just be your favorite theater chain if you had one. Because her stupid face is on the screen before every fucking movie. It's inescapable. And I'm talking about it is the last thing that plays before the movie. So unless you're timing it to where you're coming in at the little second the movie starts, you see her fucking face.
I like that.
No, it is the worst.
No.
My own personal hell would be an endless loop of her ad and then the movie Craven. And then just back to her ad and then the movie Craven for all eternity. That's my hell.
That sounds terrible for you. I mean, that's just.
But also, I want to talk about AMC real quick, just real quick. They've got their other little ad that they play right before that. And they're like, yeah, you're going to the movies, whatever. And it's something I've thought about when it comes to movie theater advertisements when they're advertising for themselves. Why do they always show somebody eating popcorn by tossing a kernel into their mouth? Like, I get that that's a neat little thing, but they're just like, hey, you're at a movie theater. Who the fuck does that in a dark,
Yeah,
lit theater? you're just wasting popped corn at that point.
That's a good point.
And they also they have drink cups that no one else has. There's like the actual hard plastic Coca-Cola drink cups that say Coca-Cola on the side. You don't get those at the fucking theater.
Yeah,
but
you don't get those.
No one, like, I love it too because no one's using a cup holder. They're just holding the fucking cup. Like, they're just like, time to watch the movie, and they're holding the cup. Like, who the fuck does that, people? Like, do you understand the movie theater process so little that your advertisements aren't what people do at movie theaters?
Yeah. Or at least updated, man. Come on. I mean, how many years ago was this filmed?
This is the new one that started in 2024.
The moving seats and the trays.
Dude, nobody's kicking back. Like, all their theaters have luxury recliners and nobody's fucking kicking their feet up. They're just all sitting there, just flat-footed, tossing popcorn in their mouth, holding their drinks the whole fucking movie.
And happy about it.
And they're just like,
I don't buy it.
They're like, fuck yeah, we're at the movies.
Happy if you were at that theater with those limitations.
And they have the reclining seats. They're just not reclining. They're sitting there in the plush recliners, just flat-footed on the ground. Like a sociopath.
Working on their posture.
Now, don't get me wrong. I don't really recline. You know what I mean? Like, I don't go back. But when I do it, I do the point to where my feet are up. But it's before it starts tilting the seat back.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like sitting vertical, but feet out. That's a nice feeling.
Yeah, I like the feet out, man. It's tight.
Anyway, we done? Let's be done.
Yeah.
All right, we're out.